All of you have probably watched the famous sitcom Friends. It tells about the life of 6 friends who live in the neighborhood. So in episode 9 of season 8, Monica and Joey have a dialogue. "What's in there, Pie?" Joey asked. Monica confirmed and offered to give it a try. The guy asked for a tiny slice, however, then corrected a few times. "Bigger. More. What are you afraid of? Cut a normal piece." I think everyone realized it was about greed. This humorous miniature only at first glance seems funny, but for our story today, it's a perfect fit. Another crime story about what unbridled desires lead to, as well as greed, selfishness, and lies. Farewell. Spring 2007. The city of Newport News, Virginia, USA. The funeral of Corey Voss, a young officer of the U.S. Navy, was held, as it should be, in a solemn atmosphere. At the farewell ceremony was attended by the leadership of the servicemen, as well as colleagues, family, friends, and simply indifferent residents. A well-meaning husband, father of 2 children, and a promising sailor was shot dead in the passenger compartment of his truck. The killer left no chance of survival. And while Marine police agents joined forces with the city's police department in search of the perpetrator, people said goodbye to Cory. They said the world was orphaned to another bright soul, they said of Cory. However, a great loss was suffered by the man's inner circle, his parents, wife, and children. Barbara Wilson, the protagonist's mother, was devastated. But even more depressing was the sad sight that unfolded in the cemetery. The grief-stricken widow was sobbing inconsolably and wailing over her husband's grave. Her reaction did not surprise those present. Many thought that Catherine Voss had lost her beloved husband, male support, and well-being. However, few guessed that behind the heartbreaking scene is a fake love and double life of the newly widowed. Background. Corey Allen Voss was born in 1977 in the city of Berwyn, Illinois. He grew up in a prosperous and friendly family, was surrounded by attention and love. At the same time, he was a little stiff and uncommunicative. In adolescence, the guy got involved with a bad company, from which he often caused problems. His mother often repeated that Cory has a great future, if, of course, he lives to 18 years and does not fit in anywhere. His mother's words proved prophetic. The difficult period was left behind as soon as the young man graduated from high school. He was very determined and wanted to connect his life with military service. After receiving a bachelor's degree, he joined the Navy. After graduation, he earned a prestigious military profession and was assigned to the Norfolk Naval Base in southeastern Virginia. The hardships of Army life did not intimidate Voss. He possessed an inquisitive mind, endless work ethic, and a resilient spirit. Cory wanted his parents to be proud of him. It must be said that his efforts were noted not only by his family, but also by his superiors. The young military man had great potential and received a rank in 4 courses of study. His co-workers often joked that he got to the Navy like a duck in the water. Fateful acquaintance. In 1999, a pleasant change occurred in Cory's life. During a vacation, he met a girl named Catherine Wiggins. She impressed him with her charisma, appetizing forms, and exotic accent. As Kat later told him, she was originally from Ukraine. However, she moved to the States in high school. The young people liked each other and soon began dating. It can be said that Cory met his first love. After 3 months, the romantic relationship bore fruit. Catherine became pregnant, and in 2000, the couple got married. Later, Barbara Wilson admitted that the young people signed not because of the child, and because the son, and without that, was going to legitimize their feelings. In the same year, the couple had a daughter, Casey, and a year later, a son, Cory Jr. The Voss family resembled a classic American family. The couple got along well with each other. The children grew up in love and care. They had a good income, a beautiful house. The financial situation allowed Kat not to work, to be engaged in the household and upbringing of the boys. At the same time, the woman did not deny herself anything, drove a BMW, dressed well, watched her appearance. Her husband in every way idolized her and worked for the good of the family. Cory's military career was going uphill. In 2005, he received the rank of officer and promotion. The only negative point was the numerous business trips of the head of the family. However, and with this task, the couple coped amicably. Distance was replaced by the joy of meetings, and feelings always remained fresh. At the same time, the man tried to spend all his free time with his children. Later, they often recalled this and believed that their father gave them everything he could. April 27th. In January 2007, Corey Voss was assigned to the ship Elrod. Finally, when the man returned from a long business trip, Catherine decided to pleasantly surprise him. In the evening of April 27th, she organized a romantic dinner by candlelight. When the children went to bed, she suddenly remembered that she had not prepared money to pay for lunches at school, so she asked her husband to drive to the nearest ATM to cash out the card. Cory, despite his fatigue, did not refuse his beloved wife. At around 11:30 p.m., he got behind the wheel of his truck and drove away from home. He did not return home after that. The night became restless for Catherine, who tried to find her husband. She repeatedly called his cell phone, but it was not answered. She even dialed the dispatch office at the naval base. The woman decided to check if perhaps he had been called to work on the way. However, the response from Norfolk employees was negative, so she started calling all the hospitals in the city. However, he was not there either. On April 28th around 6 a.m., a frightened Mrs. Voss contacted emergency services. She told the dispatcher about her trouble and asked if Cory had been in an accident. The dispatcher verified the information and advised that no such thing had been reported. The emergency worker advised the caller not to hesitate and contact law enforcement. Catherine took the advice and was at the police station within an hour. Finding. When the officers listened to Catherine, it was decided to start the investigation immediately. The search for the missing man began literally in the first hours after the report was received. By lunchtime, police received a call from a woman. She reported a suspicious truck in the parking lot, but more attention of a random passerby attracted a man in the driver's seat. The man was in an unnatural pose and was not moving. This fact worried her, and she decided to report what she saw. The description of the vehicle found was similar to the missing Cory truck. When patrol officers arrived at the address, some scary things came to light. The vehicle was in a supermarket parking lot and did indeed belong to the wanted man. The man behind the wheel turned out to be Corey Voss, and he was dead. His body was mangled with gunshot wounds. 3 bullets pierced his abdomen, 1 each to his arm and chest. It was unclear what happened to the military man who had just gone to the ATM. The first version that detectives assumed was a robbery, but at first glance nothing was missing. There was a weighty wedding ring on the dead man's hand. Also, there were no signs of a struggle or a search for anything in the car. So the authorities immediately switched to the more serious assumption: murder. However, who needed the death of a naval officer, and for what purpose? The investigation was decided to begin with the establishment of the facts of the personal life of the victim and his immediate environment. Interrogations began with Catherine Voss, Cory's 32-year-old wife. Witness statements. As soon as Kat was informed of her husband's death, she became hysterical. The officers even offered to call a doctor or take the widow to the hospital. However, in time she calmed down somewhat and was able to speak. Mrs. Voss recounted in detail the events of the previous evening, a romantic dinner, and a request to go to an ATM. Then she described her efforts to find Cory. To the questions of investigators about possible enemies, she answered categorically no. Catherine admitted that her spouse was an unconflicted and friendly person who was unlikely to have any problems. At least, she would have known about them, as they trusted each other. The marriage of the Voss couple seemed perfect, and at first glance there was no doubt about it. However, cases of murder motivated by jealousy or greed were not uncommon. That's why it was necessary to properly vet the spouse herself. Cory's relatives could not say anything bad about him. They also believed that he was loved by everyone around him. At the same time, unexpected circumstances regarding Catherine came to light. Cory's mother revealed that the young spouse was dishonest by marrying her son. It turns out that while she was dating Cory, she was married and had a daughter. However, when she found out she was pregnant, she confessed everything to her husband and divorced him, at the same time leaving the child from her first marriage to live with her grandmother. Barbara admitted that this news was shocking. However, at that time, Kat was already divorced, and Cory was very much in love and was looking forward to the birth of a daughter. At the same time, the woman reported that this became the only thing that was stressful about the daughter-in-law. Other than that, she was wonderful. After her testimony, authorities decided to find Mrs. Voss's ex-husband and talk to him. Steve Larson revealed that he met his ex-wife while in high school. They had a strong love affair, which resulted in the 17-year-old getting pregnant. Since their parents were against the relationship, the couple decided to elope. When everyone learned about Catherine's interesting situation, were forced to accept their union. It is noteworthy that Larson was also a military man who was often absent due to business trips. After returning from one of them, the spouse confessed everything, and afterwards added that she filed for divorce and left. At the same time, he said that he was ready to forgive her infidelity if she had not been so determined. Joint life with his wife he described as an eternal struggle. The family often quarreled over money. According to Steve's words, there was always not enough money for Catherine. After these stories, Mrs. Voss's personality no longer seemed ideal. Representatives of the authorities also talked to the base management and the seafarers' colleagues. None of them had anything bad to say about him. Officer Voss was considered exemplary in every way. He built his military career by himself. During his service, he had received numerous awards. Everyone argued that there was hardly anyone who would take his life because of a disagreement on the job. In order to investigate the murder, the Marine Police joined forces with the Land Police. A direct line was organized where anyone could call and report information of interest to the case. The public was extremely outraged by the death of the military officer and demanded the quick capture of the culprit. The media fueled the excitement and voiced all sorts of assumptions about what had happened. Evidence. In parallel with the collection of data on the family of Cory, other investigative activities were taking place. To learn about what happened on the night of April 27th, detectives requested surveillance footage from a store near the ill-fated ATM. A man resembling Cory did appear at the time in question. He attempted to withdraw money 3 times. However, there were insufficient funds on the card. After unsuccessful attempts, he proceeded to his truck. But as soon as he got behind the wheel, a man in all black got into the passenger seat. Unfortunately, we didn't get a good look at the passenger's face. However, through the windshield, it was visible that he pulled out a gun and pointed it at the naval officer. The car then veered off toward another supermarket and into a blind spot. Based on the available evidence, it was clear that the intruder did not intend to rob the victim. His goal was premeditated murder. Otherwise, he would have taken everything of value that was in plain sight. But he didn't. It is unlikely that someone could have prevented him because no one was recorded in the vicinity. The search for witnesses continued. Two-faced Catherine. A turning point for the investigation came after Ashley Doyle, a friend of Catherine Voss, called the hotline. The woman said that the widow appeared different than she really was. The thing is, Catherine was leading a double life. When her husband was away on business trips, she met other men. Kat went to bars and got acquainted there, posing as a native of Ukraine. In reality, it was a blatant lie. She was born and raised in Newport News, and her parents were Native Americans. Catherine imitated a foreign accent in order to have fun and to be in the constant attention of the male sex. She lied to everyone around her, and even her husband's family believed it. And it had to be said, it worked. She had tons of admirers. To go on dates, she would leave her children with relatives. Otherwise, she gave them an antihistamine with sedative properties. While the babies slept, she could do whatever she wanted. Ashley also admitted that since the end of 2006, her friend began dating a certain Michael Draven. Catherine met him on the internet and fell in love with him hard. The man presented himself as a rather famous and wealthy photographer. His MySpace account confirmed this, which initially enticed Catherine. She bragged to Ashley that, according to her lover, he was receiving a six-figure sum. However, it later turned out that it was all little more than dust in the eyes. The man lived in Newport News in an ordinary trailer with his mother and had no steady income. It frustrated Kat. She had fallen into a love trap. But since the woman was madly in love, she forgave the deception and continued the futile relationship. While Cory was absent for work, Michael often visited their home. The pal also shared her dreams of divorce, to which Ashley remarked that in the case of a breakup, her usual way of life would change. Voss replied that she would deal with it somehow. That was why Ashley had been so disturbed when she'd learned what had happened. She was suspicious of Catherine. This information shed light on the true relationship between the couple, now favorably represented otherwise, Lizhivaya, Belichnoi, wrong and mercantile woman. Possible, whether the new boyfriend was the one who wanted to take the place of her husband and rid of the only obstacle on the way to happiness, or maybe a conspiracy of two persons with the purpose of eliminating unlawful third? A what-if witness Elgal and wanted to Oglethie unhappy. It turns out that Michael Draven is indeed related to Catherine Voss. Thanks to social media, it was found that the young people were in close contact. Just a couple days after Cory's death, Michael posted pictures of himself with Kat and her children. Above one of them, he left the caption, "My daughter Casey." The man clearly claimed to be her future husband. Since it was not possible to meet him, investigators talked to his mother. During the conversation, some curious things came to light. Her son changed his real name from Anthony Neff to Michael Anthony Draven. The man did this in honor of the main character of the movie The Crow, which he wanted to be like. In general, he had a dream to build a movie career. But in fact, everything was reduced to roles in the crowd in low-budget films. He lived off a part-time newspaper delivery boy and was a lab rat. For a fee, he took part in testing drugs and different methods of treatment. Lamentation. To clear up the Voss family's financial situation, detectives pulled up recent transactions. It became apparent that a few days after her husband's death, Catherine received a $100,000 payout as a military wife. Afterward, she traveled with her children on a trip. Catherine positioned the vacation as an opportunity for a change of scenery and to distract the little ones. However, in fact, spent a romantic vacation with her lover. Financial operations on the card showed that just a few weeks she spent all the money. At the same time, the widow did not deny herself anything. Lived in an expensive hotel, ate in fashionable restaurants, bought brand-name clothes and cosmetics, pampered herself with jewelry. When Catherine returned home, she had only $900 left on her account. It also became known that she did not save available funds as soon expected to receive insurance in $400,000. Additionally, she was entitled to child welfare money, $300 a month for each child. She was also entitled to a survivor benefit of $500 to $700 monthly for the rest of her life. Kat's profligacy was also confirmed by her aunt Carol Wiggins. She said that after her grandmother died, her niece inherited $25,000. When the money was in her possession, her eyes lit up like a rat in a cheese factory. That same day they went shopping. Catherine was not stingy, spending not only on herself, but also on Carol and her children. However, in just 3 weeks, she found herself with empty pockets. The circle of suspicion was closing more and more around the newly widowed. The police asked the insurance company not to make payments until the investigation was complete. Only Catherine probably didn't realize it. She contacted the insurer every day and complained about her hard life and debts. She even complained to her superiors. What she failed to mention was that she had just recently spent $100,000. New suspect. The detectives were getting more suspicious by the minute, but there was no direct evidence against Catherine and her boyfriend, so they decided to install a wiretap. It is the weight of the results. It became clear that the couple was nervous and hiding something. Michael and Catherine were afraid for their future, as soon as possible wanted to get insurance and leave the country. At the same time, neither of them mentioned their involvement in Cory's murder. Once in a conversation between them slipped the name of a certain David Runyon, who periodically made himself known. Then the investigators decided to shift the focus of the investigation to Morgantown, West Virginia, where this man lived. It turned out that he and Michael shared common ground. They were in clinical trials together at a research center. David himself is a former soldier and an experienced shooter who could easily get a gun and handle it professionally. 8 months after the murder of Voss, the guy was put under surveillance. His figure increasingly attracted the attention of investigators. Soon detectives got a search warrant for Runyon's house. Among the papers on the desk was a note with a shopping list. At first glance, the note did not appear to be anything special. However, drawing parallels to Cory's murder, it was thought-provoking. Among the usual items contained such items as a tarp, boots, a black hooded sweatshirt, and a knife. The 27-year-old himself didn't explain it in any way, only brushed off that there was nothing unusual for a man in the list. Also found was a .357 Magnum pistol. It was missing exactly 5 rounds, which corresponded to the number of shots fired at the naval officer. Next, the potential suspect's car was examined. Under the center console, specialists found a map with a dedicated route to Newport News and Cory's handwritten name. In the glove compartment were photos of Cory himself and his wife, Catherine. Following the search, David was taken into custody, and the gun found in the house was sent for ballistics testing. Later, the study showed that the gun was the murder weapon of Voss. During questioning, Runyon was restrained, but denied involvement in the crime and connection with Michael and Catherine. Afterwards, he refused to cooperate and asked for a lawyer. A confession. That's when the investigators pulled a trick. They did not hide the fact of David's detention and followed the reaction of the other suspects. During phone conversations between lovers, it was obvious that Michael was very scared. He even uttered a phrase that he was so scared that he was ready to throw himself off a bridge. The escape from justice did not suit the authorities, and they decided to detain the man. He was depressed and offered no resistance. During interrogation, they told him that it would be better if he confessed himself and ease his conscience. Draven then confessed to conspiring to kill Cory. He said that in January 2007, Catherine said that she wanted to divorce her husband, but at the same time, she noted that without his money it would be difficult to live. Then she suggested to Michael to eliminate the spouse and get insurance, which will provide them a trouble-free life. Since neither he nor she wanted to work, this idea seemed to him a way out of the situation. However, he was not capable of crime, so he decided to seek help from his acquaintance David Runyon, to whom he offered a reward of $20,000. The man agreed. The attackers coordinated their actions. In fact, Michael accomplished his task by finding a killer for Voss. Catherine's role was to put her husband's vigilance to sleep, organize a joint dinner, then send him to an ATM at night under false pretenses. So she helped lure her ex-lover into the hands of a criminal. The criminal himself, thoroughly prepared, purchased the necessary equipment and weapons, then sat in the car to the future victim and threatened with a gun. After that, he ordered to drive away to a place where there were no cameras and shot several times in cold blood. Regarding payment for the order, it was to be made upon receipt of insurance. Michael insisted that the executor had only received $275. That's why he often called Catherine and reminded her about the payment, and she in turn rushed the insurance agent. Perhaps David did not even realize that his customers have already received $100,000 and had time to spend them. The unfortunate victim. The only thing left to do was to get Catherine talking. To do that, the detectives pulled another stunt. They had Michael call her and tell her he'd been released. That way, she'd calm down and come get him. In reality, it turned out just as the officers had hoped. She didn't pick up the phone when the station called, but she did answer Michael's call. After that, Catherine showed up, satisfied with the favorable outcome of the case. However, soon her mood changed dramatically. She was arrested. The fact of surprise played into the hands of the investigation. Her Ukrainian accent somewhere disappeared, and the woman herself looked scared and confused. When she was told that Michael confessed to everything, she turned the tables on him. Catherine accused him of manipulation and organizing the crime. No one believed her, though. Catherine, like the other conspirators, was charged with first-degree murder. The prosecutor's office wanted to request the maximum possible punishment, the death penalty for the entire trio. This motivated the defendants to plea bargain with the prosecution in hopes of mitigating their punishment. Disappointing verdicts. In February 2008, Michael Draven made his first court appearance. He was found guilty of murder for hire, carjacking, and other related offenses. The man was sentenced to life in prison without parole. In the summer of that same year, it was David Runyon's turn. The man justified his act. Allegedly, before the crime, Michael assured him that Cory was a bad father. However, his words did not mitigate responsibility, and he was sentenced to death for the murder of a military man. The convict is currently awaiting execution on death row in a federal prison. Finally, the turn came to the main instigator of the crime. In November 2008, Catherine Voss was sentenced to 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole plus 20 years. Custody of Catherine and Cory Jr. was awarded to Cory's parents. During the trial, Barbara Wilson lamented that she in no way expected such a denouement in her son's fate. Bottom line. The love story of Cory and Catherine has a tragic ending. A triangle of 3 self-serving people ended in a brutal murder for a completely innocent man. Because human greed knows no limits, it spills over the blood like poison. It penetrates into souls, cripples them, and dries them up. Such vices must be suppressed in their infancy, otherwise the consequences can be monstrous. The life we live appears ordinary and measured: school, university, work, family, daily routine, a never-ending cycle of events. We live in our own world, paying little attention to what happens around us, watching news reports or TV shows about terrible incidents or crimes. We absorb the information without deeply engaging with it. What happened is horrific, we think, but it's far away and not our concern. Yet, evil is closer than it seems. Unfortunately, no one is completely safe from it. That's why it's important to cherish what we have. Even a simple, mundane life isn't the worst scenario. I believe the families of those who encountered the dark side of life would agree, and the victims themselves would give anything to avoid the nightmare they endured and have a chance at a healthy future. What have you heard about serial criminals and perpetrators? Mentally ill individuals, heartless villains, crazy geniuses. They manage to commit terrible crimes for a long time and remain unpunished. They hold entire neighborhoods and cities in fear. However, most of them eventually get caught. Some accidentally come to the attention of the police. Others leave clues intentionally, wanting to be caught. Such characters receive significant attention in literature and film. We pick up a book or watch a thriller to give ourselves a fright, but we always have the option to stop reading or turn off the movie. Unfortunately, this choice isn't available in real life for those who fall into their traps. There probably isn't a single country in the world that hasn't faced such a situation. The new criminal story will tell us about an unstable maniac who operated in Belgium. Ronald Jansen. Ronald Allen Jansen was born on February 6, 1971, in the city of Borcel, Limburg Province, Belgium. He was the third of 4 children in the family. His father worked as a miner and his mother as a housekeeper. From childhood, Ronnie realized he could only rely on himself. To escape poverty, he needed a push, and he decided that the best path to success would be through a future profession. So the teenager studied diligently. Teachers treated him well at school and distinguished him from others. This, of course, didn't please his peers. At home, relations with his parents left much to be desired. Mr. Jansen had a bad temper and often lashed out at his family. As Ronnie grew older, He realized this behavior was abnormal and left home. After some time, his mother and the other children followed his example. Thanks to his knowledge, our protagonist easily got into a university in Hasselt. Later, he changed his mind about his chosen major and transferred to Leuven, where he studied engineering. Since money was tight, he actively worked part-time during his studies and helped his family. Finally, in 1993, he earned his long-awaited ticket to life, a diploma in industrial engineering with honors. That same year, Ronald met a girl. Natalie was 3 years older than him, born in the Netherlands. However, the age and cultural differences didn't bother the couple at all. They liked each other immediately and started dating. In 1995, the couple married. The following year, they moved to Genk, where his wife got a job offer. The head of the family also found work quickly, as his skills were in demand everywhere. He took a job as a technical and production manager. In 1998, Ronnie unexpectedly changed fields and started teaching mechanics and computer science at a local school. It must be said that he excelled in this area as well. He was respected and recognized. Everyone considered Jansen an educated and intelligent man, easy to talk to. In 2000, the family moved again, this time to Halen, where Ronald began teaching computer science, economics, and applied mechanics. As for his personal life, it initially seemed to be going well. Our protagonist didn't want to repeat his father's mistakes, so he tried to remain calm in his relationships. He and his wife dreamed of having a large family. In 1998, their first daughter was born, and 3 years later, their second. However, the arrival of children played a fatal role. You see, Ronald had suffered from chronic insomnia his whole life. With the birth of his daughters, his sleep problems worsened. Due to the constant crying and noise in the house, Ronald became irritable. The couple began to have misunderstandings and arguments. To cope with his condition and the growing tension, the head of the family often went for walks to get some fresh air. Eventually, the marriage began to fall apart. In 2006, Natalie left him, taking the children with her. Many acquaintances noted that Ronald changed after the divorce. He became quiet, withdrawn, and possibly depressed. Neighbors often saw him walking alone at night. However, the respected professor explained it as a sleep disorder. Although his behavior seemed strange, it didn't cause much alarm. Nevertheless, on January 4, 2010, there was a knock on Jansen's door. Fire on the highway. The reason for visiting Ronald was a recent incident. On a highway near the city of Diest, a car, an Opel Corsa, caught fire. On January 3rd at 2:43 a.m., a call was made to emergency services. When firefighters arrived at the scene, they discovered people inside the burning vehicle. Unfortunately, they couldn't be saved. The bodies of the two individuals were sent for examination. However, unexpected circumstances emerged during the autopsy. Using dental records, the bodies were identified. It was determined that 18-year-old Shauna Appletans and 22-year-old Kevin Paulus lost their lives due to gunshot wounds long before the fire occurred. This means someone ended the lives of the young people and then set the car on fire to cover their tracks. The double crime disturbed the local residents, who feared going out at night or letting their children play outside. They connected the incident to the crime of a young girl 3 years earlier. They demanded an immediate investigation to find and punish the criminal. The police were also eager to start the investigation and reassure the public. Many questions arose. Who were Kevin Paulus and Shauna Appletans? Who was responsible for their deaths and why? And perhaps the most pressing, was there a connection between this crime and the other incident? The disappearance of Annick. The small town of Diest was deeply upset that the tragic passing of 18-year-old Annick van Eitzel had remained unsolved for so long. Annick disappeared on April 27, 2007, after attending a Catholic party. She was a modest, kind girl, a diligent student, and a loyal friend. On that ill-fated Friday, she went with friends to the suburbs. The event she planned to attend was different from the popular ones for her age group. People of all ages attended, from children to adults. Everyone gathered to sing, dance, play games, and socialize. In general, this party had a purely safe and educational format. There was no alcohol or prohibited substances. Her friends recalled that Anik was her usual self that evening, cheerful and sociable. At 4 a.m., everyone dispersed. Like many others, Anik headed home on her bicycle. However, she never made it. Her worried parents began calling her cell phone, but no one answered. There was no word from her, which was unusual for Anik. Later, her friends told when and where they last saw her, but their words didn't bring comfort. The road went through a forest. Initially, they rode together, but their paths diverged at an intersection. She hadn't been seen since. Family and friends participated in the search. When their efforts failed, the Van Eitzel family turned to the police. Detectives began the investigation immediately. 70 police officers, 200 volunteers, and a rescue helicopter joined the search. At the same time, every possible scenario was considered. Close associates and all party attendees were questioned. It was discovered that Anik got along well with her family, so the possibility of her running away from home was ruled out right away. Additionally, she didn't have a boyfriend with whom she might have left. On the surface, there were no apparent reasons for her to end her life either. She had no enemies, no issues, and no psychological disorders. The event attendees didn't notice anything suspicious. None of them seemed suspect. Locals living near the disappearance site didn't see the girl described. Time passed, but Anik, along with her bicycle, remained missing. The route she took was thoroughly analyzed, and every surveillance camera along it was reviewed. The entire area was searched extensively. It was as if she and her bicycle had vanished into thin air. Thus, the police concluded that the missing girl had likely fallen victim to a crime. At the same time, they were struck by the complete lack of evidence. There were no traces of the missing girl, none of her belongings, nor signs of a struggle. Perhaps she was kidnapped, and soon someone would demand a ransom. But even that didn't happen. The hope of finding her alive was quickly fading. However, when flyers with her photo were posted everywhere and her parents spoke to the media, new details emerged. Several people contacted the police, reporting that on the night of April 27th, they heard suspicious screams in the forest. However, they couldn't see anything in the dark. Data from Anik's cell phone also raised false hopes. It was determined that the phone had been turned on and off several times that night and the following morning. The locations where the device was traced were checked, but nothing was found there either. The body and the bicycle. The girl's body was discovered a week later. A passerby in Lummen near the Albert Canal noticed a suspicious package floating on the water while on a walk along the embankment and immediately reported it to the police. The discovery was indeed suspicious, as the package contained a woman's body, carefully wrapped and weighted down with stones to prevent it from surfacing. However, the person who did this didn't account for the strong current and the process of decomposition. Since the body had been in the water for a long time, identifying the woman was difficult. Nevertheless, dental records confirmed the specialist's suspicions. There was no doubt that the woman found was the missing Anik van Eitzel. The autopsy revealed that the cause of her death was a blunt force trauma to the head. Additionally, it was discovered that she had been taken advantage of. The location where her body was found was 16 miles away from where she had disappeared, indicating that the criminal transported the victim to cover their tracks. It seemed that her body might have contained some clues about her tormentor, but no evidence was found. If her bicycle had been found, it might have yielded fingerprints of the perpetrator. Unfortunately, this didn't go as planned either. Several months later, the missing bicycle was found in Leuven, about 50 miles from the scene. The bicycle had been hidden in a secluded spot. The culprit had repainted and thoroughly cleaned it, leaving no traces. The news of Anik's tragic death was devastating. Many had hoped until the end that she would be found alive. For her parents, accepting what happened was unbearable. However, the desire to find the criminal and bring them to justice gave them the strength to keep going. It must be said that after many years, the moment of retribution finally came. a false lead. Initially, there were doubts about the identity of Kevin Paulus, the owner of the burned car. The investigation revealed some interesting facts. First, the young man was well known to the police. He had been involved in multiple fights in the past. By a strange coincidence, Anik's bicycle was found in the city where Shauna, the other victim, lived. Some even speculated that they might have known each other. This led to the theory that Kevin himself could have been the criminal, possibly ending Anik's life first and then, years later, doing the same to Shauna before setting the car on fire and ending his own life. However, this assumption was short-lived. There was no direct evidence, and it was later revealed that the young man hadn't taken his own life but had been brutally deprived of it. The authorities faced a long and challenging investigation. The circumstances of the deaths were horrifying. If both incidents were connected, it meant a serial criminal was involved. The profile of such a person was concerning, intelligent enough to dispose of evidence effectively and cunning enough to remain undetected. This type of criminal is among the most difficult to catch. It takes a lot of time and effort to apprehend them, during which the perpetrator could find another victim. A lead. To learn more about the murdered couple, detectives met with their family and friends, but they provided no information of significant interest to the investigation. The detectives then decided to question the neighbors. The residents mentioned that the young couple lived together, but noticed nothing suspicious on the night of January 2nd to 3rd. However, they did mention a conflict between the victims and another neighbor. According to them, Shauna often quarreled with this seemingly nice man for some reason and would openly express her negative feelings toward him. Kevin would frequently stand up for her. Once, their argument almost escalated into a full-blown fight, but bystanders intervened and the scuffle was stopped. Investigators decided to speak with this suspicious neighbor, and on January 4, 2010, a knock was heard at the apartment of Ronald Allen Jansen, the professor. The door was opened by a middle-aged man who didn't raise any concerns. He hospitably welcomed the detectives, listened to them, and provided explanations regarding the conflict with the neighboring couple. Ronald admitted that he did occasionally endure Shauna's taunts and Kevin's attacks, but he chalked it up to their youth. When asked where he was on January 2nd, he explained that he was home watching TV. Unfortunately, no one could confirm his alibi. At the same time, Ronnie made it clear that he wasn't involved in what happened to his adversaries and didn't feel any satisfaction or desire for revenge. However, something in his words raised doubts. Moreover, Jansen denied ever being involved in a fight, as he considered himself a well-mannered and respected person who wasn't capable of such behavior. As is often the case, appearances can be deceiving. Despite his outward image, the 39-year-old professor was arrested. Later, a search of his home uncovered a gun hidden in a large bag of cat food. After this unexpected discovery, his behavior changed. During the next interrogation, he was nervous and couldn't explain where the weapon came from. When investigators changed their interrogation tactics, Ronald began to break down. This led to the revelation of the horrific details of the crimes committed by the serial criminal who earned the nickname the Professor. The crime against Kevin and Shauna. Ronnie confessed that on the evening of January 2nd, he couldn't sleep as usual, so he went outside to get some air. While walking, a car with Shauna and Kevin inside pulled up near the house. The hateful neighbors started mocking and insulting him. Unable to endure it, he went back to his apartment, retrieved a gun and a can of gasoline, but by the time he returned, the neighbors had left. He then decided to go to their home and knocked on the door. Shauna opened it. Showing the weapon, he ordered her to be quiet and called for Kevin. He then threatened to end their lives if they didn't drive him to a location he specified. The frightened young couple obeyed, went downstairs, got into the car, and drove out of town. Kevin was behind the wheel, while Shauna sat behind him, effectively trapping her as there were no rear doors. She cried and pleaded for their release, but Ronnie was unmoved. He sat next to the driver, keeping the gun trained on him. In a deserted area, the car stopped. Jansen then shot Kevin twice in the head, ending his life instantly. He then threw Kevin's body out of the car and drove over it. Shanna was crying and begging for her life. In response, the criminal told her he would spare her if she agreed to engage in intimacy with him. The girl complied, but he later went back on his word, deciding it wasn't wise to leave a witness alive. He shot her and dragged Kevin's lifeless body back into the car. Then he drove closer to their home and set the car on fire. Ronald returned through the field, arriving back at 4 a.m. He carefully washed, removed his soiled clothes, and burned them. He then disposed of the ashes in a ditch and hid the gun in the cat food, where it was eventually found. He hadn't managed to dispose of the weapon because he didn't expect to be caught so soon. Ronald insisted that his actions were a matter of honor, claiming that he was defending himself and putting an end to the constant harassment. His words had some validity, as it was later revealed during psychiatric evaluations that certain childhood events, which he had never spoken about, had significantly affected him. Ronnie's childhood. Young Ronnie was often bullied at school, mocked for his lisp. One day, he couldn't take the teasing anymore and fought back, beating his tormentor with a bat. As a result, he was suspended from school. To prevent further conflicts, Mrs. Jansen transferred her son to another school, where he was treated with understanding. However, the hardships didn't end there. The truth is, Ronald also faced mistreatment from his father. This led to a deep fear of being at home and insomnia, which plagued him for the rest of his life. The defendant admitted that at one point he decided to end it all, to take his own life. But he changed his mind, feeling sorry for his mother, who would be left alone. Instead, he decided to eliminate the source of his misery. A plan formed in his mind. His father suffered from diabetes and took insulin injections. Ronnie replaced the medication with another dangerous substance. As a result, his tormentor almost died, but was saved just in time. It was clear to the father whose doing it was. However, he did not go to the police, but instead started to torment his son even more. After that, the young man decided to run away from home. Apparently, the criminal's troubled mind underwent significant changes at a young age, making it impossible for him to tolerate any form of abuse. However, later, it became clear that Jansen's anger was directed not only at his tormentors, but also at innocent people. The crime of Anik. In a shocking turn, Ronald confessed to the crime of Anik, committed in 2007. According to him, she became an unintended victim. That night, he couldn't sleep and decided to drive to another town. Along the way, he encountered a beautiful girl on a bicycle. He wanted to get to know her better, but he chose a poor way to approach her. He blocked her path. Naturally, the girl was frightened, got off her bike, and started to run. Jansen got angry, chased her down, tied her hands, and threatened her with a gun. He then forced her into his car and took her to his home. Ronnie promised to let Anik go if she didn't cause any trouble. The suspect claimed he didn't intend to take advantage of or deprive the girl of her life. He just wanted her to stay with him for a while. By morning, he planned to let her go. However, when he was alone with the girl, his plans changed. He realized he couldn't do what he had told her because she would tell everyone. So, Ronald beat her, took advantage of her, and finally struck her with a hammer. He then disposed of her body by placing it in a bag filled with rocks and throwing it into a canal. When the cold-blooded suspect returned home, he cleaned everything with cleaning agents and destroyed all evidence. His words about just wanting to spend the night with Anik sounded unconvincing. It was clear that the criminal knew exactly what he was doing and understood the consequences. Thus, when he kidnapped the girl, he knew he would end her life. Intimate predator. Later, Ronald confessed to 3 additional assaults he committed while studying in Leuven. However, he couldn't remember the faces of the women or the dates of the incidents. In total, during the investigation, He admitted to 5 similar episodes. Nevertheless, the investigation suggested a different number. He was accused of 20 assaults that occurred between 2001 and 2010 in student dormitories. The suspect would break in through a window, attack, and threaten with a knife. Afterward, he would proceed with intimate acts without any resistance. Additionally, it was believed he could have been involved in a series of 10 crimes committed in 1991, as the method was similar. However, this remains speculation without substantial evidence. The trial. On September 20th, 2011, the defendant stood trial. Zvonimir Miskovich, Ronald's lawyer, tried to mitigate his responsibility by highlighting the positive aspects of his character and his difficult childhood. None of his acquaintances could believe that quiet Ronnie had turned out to be such a monster. His 63-year-old mother testified that she had never seen her son chasing women and considered him a good person. During a visit, he confessed to me that all the crimes happened in moments of madness, she said. I'm devastated, but Ronnie is still my boy. I have to be there for him, no matter how hard it is. Ronald's ex-wife also testified that she had a good relationship with him and trusted him with their children twice a week. I always thought he was a kind and gentle person, she said. This criminal is not the person I knew. The prosecution sought the maximum possible sentence for the defendant. The prosecutor emphasized that they were dealing with a dangerous psychopath, a serial predator, and a criminal who has no place among normal people. Finally, on October 21, 2011, Ronald Jansen was found guilty of the crimes against Anik, Shayna, and Kevin, including their abduction and the assaults on the women with the use of torture. The mitigating circumstances mentioned by the defense were not considered. The court sentenced the defendant to life imprisonment. Controversial justice. On September 10, 2012, Ronald was found guilty of 12 assaults committed with the threat of using a weapon, multiple attempts on life, as well as torture and barbarism. However, given the previous sentence, the new verdict did not add any additional punishment. One might think that a life sentence is a fair judgment for a mass criminal. Unfortunately, practice in Belgium suggests otherwise. Offenders with such sentences spend between 15 to 23 years behind bars and are then released. In fact, by 2026, Jansen could be eligible for parole and continue his bloody crimes. It seems the professor was aware of this, which is why he smiled during the trial and showed no remorse for the sentence he received. In 2012, at the Summer Olympics in London, the star of a young Puerto Rican boxer, Felix Verdejo Sanchez, shone brightly. He was called a diamond, one of the most promising athletes of his country. He was predicted to win titles and gold medals. Then it seemed to everyone that this talented and motivated young man will reach fantastic heights in sports. In 2021, the name of the boxer again traveled all the world's media, but this time fell into the section of criminal chronicles. This story is about a teenage attachment that grew into a kind of addiction and led to a terrible tragedy, and also about how the author of the main knockout of 2014, who was praised and promoted by two-time Olympic champion Vasyl Lomachenko, almost received a death sentence, but eventually went to prison for life. It is noteworthy that despite the presence of irrefutable evidence and confessions of the boxer's accomplice, he himself to this day refuses to plead guilty. The future star of world boxing was born in the Puerto Rican city of San Juan in 1993 on May 19th. He grew up in a rather modest large family and from an early age was fond of port. True, in childhood, he planned to connect his life with baseball, but his further fate was determined by a funny incident. When the boy was 9 years old, a family friend came to visit them with his son of the same age. The boys were playing in the yard, but suddenly quarreled and a fight broke out. Parents separated the children, and the father of the future athlete noted that if he wants to fight with someone in the future, let him wear boxing gloves. After that fight, Felix, at his request, was taken to a local gym, where the boy, as he later admitted himself, from the first training session fell in love with boxing. At the age of 16, he won the Pan American Junior Championships. A year later, he won his country's championship, and a year later he went to the Olympic Games in London, where he reached the quarterfinals. In the same year began his brilliant career in the professional ring. In total, Verdejo had 29 fights, gaining 27 confident victories, and in 2014 he was recognized as the author of the best knockout in the fight against Sergio Villanueva. A year later, Felix won his first championship belt with the WBO Latino title, which he subsequently defended 6 more times in 2 years. Everyone who saw him in the fight had no doubt. This young man will write his name in the history of world boxing. And now let's get to know Keishla Rodriguez. The girl was born in November 1993 in San Juan. The full name given to her at birth is Keishla Marlene Rodriguez Ortiz. Her parents, Jose and Kayla Rodriguez, had another common daughter, Bereliz Nicole, and also the couple raised Kayla's son, Jonathan, from a previous marriage of a woman. Keishla grew up an open and sociable girl. She did well in school and adored animals, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian in the future. Her best friend was her sister Bereliz, to whom she confided all her secrets and worries. Keishla studied in the same school with Felix Verdejo, who was her age. Young people were acquainted since childhood, and in adolescence between them began a romantic relationship. In 2011, Rodriguez's parents divorced and separated. Kayla moved to relatives in Florida, and her daughters, who were by then already adults, decided to stay in San Juan. Despite the fact that each of the sisters had long since lived their own lives, they continued to stay in close contact and told each other about everything that was happening to them. At the age of 18, a promising boxer, who has already managed to take part in the Olympic Games, had an affair with a young schoolgirl and aspiring model, Elisa Maria Santiago Sierra. At that time, the girl was only 14 years old, and she was still in school, but even then she made big plans for the future with a promising and world-famous athlete. In addition, Eliza's parents were not at all against this relationship. Attractive and talented Felix, who has always had a lot of fans, becoming a boxing star, literally bathed in the rays of fame and was surrounded by female attention. He did not miss the opportunity to spin a novel or a passing affair on the side, and also, despite the serious relationship with Eliza, continued to meet with his school friend Keishla. Keishla's sister, Bereliz, and her mother, Kayla Rodriguez, knew about the affair and did not approve of the relationship. In addition, the situation was very ambiguous. On the one hand, Eliza considered herself the only woman and great love of the athlete, was preparing for the wedding, and made far-reaching plans for their joint future. On the other hand, Keishla knew that the lover has a fiancé, but at the same time, Felix did not let her go. On top of that, he was her first great love, and deep down, the naive girl herself still hoped to be the one. In 2016, the boxer did marry the young Eliza, who at that time was barely 19 years old. Eliza by that time was already quite a famous model, had tens of thousands of followers in social networks, and also opened her own beauty studio for eyelash extensions. In August of the same year, just a few months after the wedding, the athlete got into a serious car accident when he was rushing on his motorcycle. He was taken to the hospital in serious condition with head injuries, bruises, and lacerations. His trainer, Ricky Marquez, seriously feared that his talented charge would go off the rails at the height of his career. But Felix, contrary to the disappointing prognosis, made a rapid recovery and soon returned to the ring. In September 2019, the boxer published in his profile in the social network a picture with Elise, who was in a large term of pregnancy. In the comment to the photo, he wrote, "Soon I will meet my daddy's princess." And a month later, he announced the birth of a daughter, who was given the name Miranda Verdejo Santiago. The young man in public looked like a loving husband, caring father, and an exemplary family man. But secretly from his wife, he continued to meet with Keishla, who could not let go. As Eliza later admitted, she guessed that her husband was cheating on her, but every time he tearfully vowed to leave his mistress. Keishla repeatedly tried to break off this painful relationship, but Felix would not let her go. She had no other men, because the boxer threatened that if he found out about the fact that Keishla had someone, not good for her and her chosen one, Keishla herself, who had fallen in love with Verdejo since high school, continued to love him despite everything. Rodriguez, as planned, connected her life with the care of animals and got a job at the Center of Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics. Colleagues described her as conscientious, hard-working, and very responsible. She lived with 2 dogs and a cat, which she simply adored. In 2020, Eliza discovered the correspondence of her husband with several mistresses, including Kishla. The wife gave her husband a scandal and threw him out of the house, threatening that she would file for divorce and forbid him to see his daughter. Eliza's threats had an effect. In addition, in the career of the athlete at that time, there was a serious decline and unnecessary problems where he did not need. For a while, he really stopped seeing Rodriguez, but Felix still did not let her go, trying to control almost every step Kishla. After a few months of secret visits resumed, and in April 2021, Kishla discovered that she was pregnant. She bought a rapid test at the drugstore, which only confirmed her fears. She first called her sister, who was aware of her complicated relationship with the athlete, and told her everything. It was out of the question to have an abortion, because Kishla was already 27 years old, and she was ready to have a child, even if she had to raise it on her own. A few days later, Kishla broke the news to the father of her child, hoping in her heart that he would accept it, but Felix was not happy, to put it mildly. He got angry and told his mistress that she should go to the doctor, and if the pregnancy is confirmed, it will be necessary to have an abortion. Naturally, Rodriguez answered him with a firm refusal, but the boxer began to threaten her and insist. Felix said that an illegitimate child will finally destroy his reputation, and this he cannot allow. After Kishla's visit to the hospital, her pregnancy was confirmed, and she now had a certificate to prove it. She called Felix and told him everything, which made him furious. Felix shouted and demanded that Kishla immediately get rid of the child, but she again responded with a categorical refusal. Then the athlete decided to go on the sly, saying that he did not believe her, and wanted to personally look at the issued medical certificate. He appointed Kishla a meeting in the evening in a crowded place, which did not surprise her, because they always tried not to draw attention to themselves and did not get in front of anyone. A few days before the meeting, the boxer stopped by his old friend Luis Antonio Pediz, who worked in a local machine shop and also had ties with the criminal world, selling illegal drugs. Felix briefly outlined the situation and asked him to help him get rid of his pregnant mistress. Luis had previously been in the field of vision of the police, and the prospect of being in prison scared him, but the athlete was persistent, assured that everything would go smoothly and the police will never come out on them. Besides, Felix promised him an impressive cash reward, and Luis agreed. With the support of an accomplice, Felix called Kishla and told her that he wanted to meet her on the evening of April 29th to confirm her pregnancy and decide what to do next. Immediately after talking to her lover, Kishla called her sister back and told her everything. She still had hope that Felix would accept her child and would not insist on an abortion. But Berylise all this situation is quite alarmed. She knew that the boyfriend had threatened her sister, and she was worried that he wouldn't do anything to her. Berylise called her mother and shared her concerns, but even together they could not dissuade Kishla from that fateful meeting. At the appointed time, Rodriguez, taking a doctor's note, arrived at the meeting in her own Kia Forte automobile. Verdejo drove there in his pickup truck, in the back of which Luis was hiding. Kishla immediately got into the athlete's car and showed him the results of the tests. He once again talked about terminating the pregnancy, but Kishla, crying, again responded with a refusal. Against this background, the couple began to quarrel violently, turning to shouting. Then Felix suddenly hit Kishla in the head with his fist, from which she immediately lost consciousness. Until Kishla regained consciousness, Felix took a syringe with a large dose of illegal substances hidden in the glove compartment of the car, which Luis had obtained at his request, and injected Kishla. Then, together with his accomplice, they carried her to the back of the car, where there were already prepared pieces of wire and a concrete block. The men tied Rodriguez up, attached the load, and then covered her with a tarp so that no one would accidentally see anything. Felix then returned to the pickup truck while his accomplice got behind the wheel of Kishla's vehicle. Together, they drove to the bridge over the San Jose Lagoon. It was virtually deserted at night, and the men, making sure no one could see them, threw Kishla, still alive, into the water. Afterward, however, they decided to fire a few test shots in pursuit, using the firearms they had brought with them so as not to leave the victim any chance. Having finished the massacre, each of the perpetrators went home. Kishla's co-workers were the first to worry when she didn't show up at the Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics Center the next day. Kishla has always been very responsible and couldn't just not show up for work without notifying anyone. Since she didn't answer the phone, it was decided to contact her sister to find out what happened. After several unsuccessful attempts to contact her sister, she went to her house. No one answered the door, but Berelise had a spare key, so she got in without difficulty. However, she was met only by hungry animals who had not eaten anything for almost 24 hours. Now Berelise was already in a panic because she realized that something terrible or irreparable had happened to Kishla. She immediately called her mother and told her everything, and then reported to the police about her suspicions and threats to her sister. She also called Felix, but he claimed that he had spent the previous evening and night at home with his family and had not gone to any meeting. The missing girl's mother took the first flight from Florida to San Juan. She thought that her lover might have taken her daughter to a private clinic and paid for her to have an abortion without her consent. Kayla didn't even want to think about the fact that Kishla was no longer alive. The first thing to do was to question the missing girl's neighbors and co-workers, but they didn't notice anything suspicious and couldn't provide the investigation with any useful information. In parallel, messages about the disappearance of Rodriguez were posted on popular social networks with requests to respond to those who know anything about her fate or current whereabouts. The case quickly received wide publicity, and when it became known that the missing girl was in a long-term relationship with a famous athlete and was expecting a child from him, reporters literally lined up to interview any of Rodriguez's family members. The relatives did not hold anything back and spoke out about their suspicions, among other things, blaming Felix for the incident. On April 30th, Kishla's car was found abandoned on the east side of the city, with her documents and personal belongings inside. No signs of struggle were found in the interior, giving a faint hope of finding its owner alive. On May 1st, a passerby strolling on the bridge over the lagoon saw a strange shape resembling a human body in the shallow water. He reported his discovery to the police, who soon recovered from the water the body of a young woman, presumably the same one the whole city had been looking for several days. Members of the Rodriguez family, who arrived to identify the body, hoped to the last that it was not Kishla, but their hopes were not realized. The body had been in the water for several days and changed a lot, but the girl was immediately identified by a remarkable tattoo on her arm. When news of the gruesome discovery hit the press, the residents of the city revolted and began to go out to spontaneous rallies, demanding punishment for those responsible. The same day, Verdejo was detained and taken to the police station for questioning, but the athlete categorically denied his involvement and claimed that on the night of Kishla's disappearance, he was at home with his family. As there was nothing to charge him, Felix was released on his own recognizance. One of the key witnesses was the athlete's legal wife, who at the first interrogation admitted that she was aware of his affair with Kishla, but that she had heard about her rival's pregnancy for the first time. On top of that, she did not confirm her husband's alibi, saying that he was not at home on the night of the murder. The first thing investigators did was check traffic surveillance footage on the way to the bridge from which Kishla was thrown. That's how they found Felix's pickup truck and the victim's car traveling behind each other. But the Kia Forte was clearly not driven by its owner. On the same day, the boxer's car was seized for examination, and in its body they found some hair of the deceased. Luis was the first to surrender to the police, promising to tell the whole truth in exchange for a reduced sentence. Felix was also taken into custody, but he refused to cooperate with the investigation, did not answer questions, and continued to deny his guilt, despite the presence of irrefutable evidence. A firearm was seized from Felix, which he used to shoot the victim from the bridge, and for which he had an official permit. Also, a cell phone check confirmed the fact that Felix, Luis, and Kishla were in the same location on that fateful night. Kishla's final farewell was on May 8th, and the funeral ceremony was all over the national news. It was a kind of action, calling for the perpetrators of the tragedy to be punished to the full extent of the law as well as an action to draw public attention to the problem of gender violence. The coffin with Rodriguez's body was brought to the cemetery not in the traditional hearse, but in a white carriage, over which white flower petals were thrown from the air. Many famous Puerto Rican natives, including show business stars, athletes, politicians, and public figures, have spoken out about the high-profile incident. Verdejo was charged with carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the murder of an unborn child. All of these crimes together carried the death penalty, but the relatives of the deceased from the very beginning asked the court to elect a sentence of life imprisonment for the killer, so that he would suffer in captivity for the rest of his life. The hearing was repeatedly postponed due to the worldwide coronavirus pandemic, but in the spring of 2021, the trial was held in virtual mode. The court found that the crime was committed by a group of persons by prior conspiracy and with particular cruelty against a pregnant woman. It was possible to reconstruct the chain of events of that night and the details of the crime, mainly thanks to the testimony of Luis, who did not deny his guilt. He admitted that it was he who, at the request of a friend, got the drug for injection and also brought a wire and a concrete block to get rid of the body. But Felix continued to insist on his non-involvement in the case, although his words could not seriously affect the situation. By the way, the wife of the boxer, who acted in court as a witness, almost immediately after the arrest of her husband filed for divorce and tried to abstract from what was happening, focusing on the development of his business and raising a young daughter. According to some reports, not so long ago, Elisa Santiago remarried. Elisa herself admitted in an interview that she repeatedly received anonymous calls and messages with death threats, as well as death wishes to her and even Miranda. Many considered it was the spouse of the athlete as the organizer of the crime, but no evidence was found. In the summer of 2023, it became known that the jury, having familiarized itself with all the evidence and heard the testimony of all the witnesses, was finally ready to announce the final verdict. Felix Verdejo and his accomplice Luis Cadiz were found guilty on each of the charges against them. But despite this, the killers have not yet been sentenced. The next court hearing is scheduled for mid-November 2023. Most likely both men involved in the deaths of Keishla Rodriguez and her unborn child will likely go to prison for life, with no right to ever leave prison. I'm tired. I don't understand how long this can go on, and what am I waiting for? I really loved him. I loved him with all my heart. Yes, I was too young a girl then, when we got married, when we stood in front of the altar and his parents be damned, when I swore before God that I would love him forever and only heaven would part us. Why can't I take it back? Do I have to torture myself day in and day out just because I made those promises? I haven't loved him for a long time. Just like he doesn't love me. He only loves himself, his parents, and our children. But who will love me? In these moments of despondency, I feel that even God has turned his back on me. How else could he have given me to this family for whom I am nothing? Who only remember I exist when they need something? Summer, clean this up. Summer, take out the trash. Summer, damn it. Can you stop stomping your feet so loud? I'm sick of it. I have to tell Will everything. Take the kids and get out of this house. But who's gonna let me go? Especially with the kids. Will's dad won't even let me leave the house. I hope I stay alive at least. This entry was made by Summer Inman in her personal diary, which she kept hidden from her husband and his parents. This diary, the one place where she could express her thoughts and not be afraid of being judged or even punished. 1983, Logan, Ohio. In a small American town of only 40,000 people, a new evangelical church called Tabernacle of Faith opens, which none of the residents had ever heard of before. The founder of the church, David Oyedepo, traveled to the town from Nigeria and told the congregation that he had an 18-hour meeting with God, during which the Almighty told him that it was time to free the world from the oppression of the devil through preaching and prayer. David Oyedepo was an extremely charismatic preacher, and that is why the Tabernacle of Faith Church became very popular in Logan. It was at this church that Bill and Sandra Inman met. Bill was already 18 years old at that time and played musical instruments at the church on Sundays. Sandra also attended church with her parents. Sandra recalls that the young musician parishioner very much liked her parents, and they did not hesitate to allow the young people to play a wedding. A year later, Bill and Sandra have a son, Will. According to family traditions, Will was born with his parents, went to church, and when he was 17 years old, then just like his father, met in the Tabernacle of Faith with a very young 15-year-old summer cook. Only with marriage young people were not in a hurry and waited until Summer was 18 years old. In 2004, after their wedding, Will's parents insisted that the young people lived with them. Summer did not like this idea, of course, but her husband was very dependent on his father and could not cross him, so she left her parents' house and moved into the house of the Inman family. That same year, another turning point in the Inman family's life occurs. Bill creates his own flock and remodels the family garage, formerly used as a workshop, into a self-proclaimed church. From Summer Inman's diary, Will's father has changed a lot. I literally don't recognize him. Tonight at family dinner, he told us that he hears the voice of God in his dreams and that he wants to share this revelation with others for their own good. Will himself seems to realize that his father is becoming a religious fanatic. I've seen him roll his eyes, but what can he say against it? Yes, indeed, to some, like Summer, Bill Inman's idea may seem delusional, but locals came to his garage in droves, prayed, listened intently to their leaders' speeches, and even made donations. In 2005, Will and Summer had their firstborn son. They named him Alex. But right after the baby was born, everyone realized that their family was in huge financial trouble. The women were forbidden to work anywhere. They were obliged to do only household chores, and 4 adults and 1 infant cannot live only on donations from parishioners and on Will's rare part-time jobs. At a family council, Bill said they were moving to Florida. In Florida, Bill and Will did construction work while the women still stayed home and raised baby Alex. From Summer's diary, not much changed with the move to Florida. All day Will and his father disappear at work, and Sandra and I stay home with Alex all day and night. When is Will going to grow up and be on his own? I don't think I can wait for that. Having come to the conclusion that in Florida a lot of money cannot earn, Bill Inman decides to return to his native state, but because of non-payment of taxes, their house in Logan was taken away, and the court ruled a ban on its subsequent redemption, so they moved to a rented house in the countryside Vinton, which is not far from Logan. There, Summer also gives birth to 2 daughters, Kelly and Alana. From Summer's diary, we still don't have any money. Will wants me to have 12 children for him. I sometimes laugh in his face, which he takes offense to, and sometimes even stops talking to me. In 2010, Bill Inman, now officially the leader of Tabernacle of Faith Church, and together with his wife Sandra, they register a non-profit organization called Mercy Ranch. A bright idea is born in his head, to build on behalf of the church a home for orphans, widows, and the homeless. But naturally, there was no money for the idea. However, the new leader found a way out of this situation. He invented a lottery, according to which the winner will win $200,000 and the remaining 99 people will receive no less valuable prizes. The remaining funds would be used to build the house Bill dreamed of. Television and radio ads were run, and Bill himself even went door to door at first, asking residents to participate in the charity lottery. The result was stunning. Bill Inman managed to raise $1 million. The grand prize drawing was scheduled for September 2010, but as you may have guessed, no drawing took place in September, just like it didn't take place in October or November. Bill Inman simply defrauded the people who trusted him, and he had no plans to return the money to anyone either. It is during this period that Will's father hires Adam Peters to take care of the landscaping on their property, as well as other household chores. Adam sees Summer all the time and begins to feel sympathy for her. What he doesn't realize is that Summer and Will are having a crisis in their relationship. Nevertheless, he does not give up and gives the young woman signs of attention. After a while, Summer filed for divorce. She took the children and went to her parents. There she got a job for the first time in her life, a cleaner at the bank. Unfortunately, because of her early marriage and constant confinement in the Inman home, she had no education and no work experience other than raising children, so Summer didn't expect to get a better paying job. But deep down she was glad even that, because for the first time in many years she felt independent, and for the first time nobody told her anything. Despite her resentment toward Will, she didn't mind her father seeing the children as much as he saw fit. The children, in her opinion, needed their father as much as they needed their grandparents. Indeed, Bill Inman, despite his tyrannical character, treated the children very affectionately and caring. To deny this was foolish. One day in December 2010, a bailiff came to the Inman house and ordered the family to leave the house for non-payment of rent. Summer found out about it, and so she went over to the house to pick up all the things she hadn't had time to pack when she moved in with her parents. It was scary to show up at a house where she was now considered a traitor, so she called Adam to help her with the packing. When the Inman family saw that Summer had arrived with her new lover, they wouldn't let anyone in the house. They hurled all sorts of curses at them and promised that all of Summer's belongings in the house would be burned in the backyard. Even the police couldn't help with the conflict, as Will attacked and even beat up a policeman who arrived, while Adam, who was shocked by what he had seen, shouted that he would find him and kill him. That same day, Summer decided to file a report against her husband. In it, she pointed out that Will had never been the same, that it wasn't until after the wedding that he became in complete control of her. Her calls, texts, emails, he even controlled her lunchtime and how much she needed to eat, how much time to spend in the shower, and how much time to be outdoors. Periodically, he even took her phone away from her, and Summer could be out of touch for a week, even with her own parents. He also admitted to her that he wanted to find a second wife, and without hiding from Summer, he registered on dating sites, where he posted intimate photos of himself and openly corresponded with other women. In her diary, Summer often wrote that she wanted to divorce Will, but was afraid. This fear was understandable. Will had warned her numerous times that if she divorced him, he would shoot her. The police took a statement from a frightened Summer, who had harbored the fear for so many years, and came to the Inman home again. When questioned, Will answered yes. He took his wife's phone away from her, but only so she wouldn't talk to her lover 24 hours a day. Yes, he watched her diet, but only because he cared about her health. His answers didn't seem credible to the police, and they forbade him to go near his ex-wife, and he also received a fine and probation for this behavior. The Inman family could not ignore such, as it seemed to them, abuse of their son, and they in turn wrote a response, but already on Adam Peters. In their statement, they pointed out that when he worked in their house, he showed an unhealthy interest in Summer's young children, and that the subsequent presence of children in his company could end badly. Their fictions, of course, were not confirmed. After that, the worst thing in Summer's life happened. Close to midnight, March 22, 2011, Summer was finishing her work at the bank, which is in the heart of Logan. The branch itself had closed by then, and all she had to do was clean up her workspace, dusting and taking out the trash. She'd texted Adam to tell him that she didn't have much time left and that she'd be home soon. It was already 12 o'clock at night. Summer was late, although she had never been late before. Adam was beginning to get seriously worried. There was no telling what this Will might be up to. Peters decided to meet Summer. By then, the doors to the ward were locked. No lights were on in the windows, which meant Summer wasn't there. Adam walked around the building but didn't see anyone, so he went to the dumpsters where the young woman was hauling the trash bags that had accumulated all day. She wasn't there either, but near the bins he found Summer's things, her purse, her cell phone, and her red jacket, which was lying in the grass, a little farther away from her things. There was no time to hesitate. He immediately dialed the phone number of the police. The police arrived and did a search of the belongings, then knocked on the bank and interviewed the security guards, to which they said that Summer had gone home over an hour ago, and they hadn't seen her again. At the glow of the police car's lights, 3 people approached. As it turned out, they were witnesses to the kidnapping. The two women were out for an evening jog, and although it was already dark, they saw a white Ford drive up to the bank cleaner's house. Two men in black masks get out and push the screaming woman into the back seat. At the woman's screams, another eyewitness ran up to the car and tried to save her, but the blonde woman behind the wheel sprayed him in the face with a gas can, and the guy fell down, and the car with the kidnappers drove away. The women were without phones, so they immediately ran to the nearest police station, where they interrupted each other very emotionally and tried to recount what they had seen. The police officers on duty only laughed at their story, naively believing that the night runners had made it all up. Who would think of kidnapping a bank cleaner with garbage bags in her hands? But as it turned out, the story was now pure truth. And because of the slowness of the cops, it was now impossible to find Summer on a hot lead. Like I said before, Logan is a small town. That's why the news of Summer's abduction by 3 unidentified men spread through the town overnight. By morning, proactive citizens had organized into groups to search for the missing woman. They scoured parks, vacant lots, abandoned warehouses, but Summer was nowhere to be found. A week before she disappeared, Will Inman tried to contest his child support payments. According to the court order, he was supposed to pay $150 for each child, but since his monthly salary was only $500, he asked that the payment be reduced to $150 for the 3 children in total. Will also asked for full custody of his children, but this was denied by the court. Since Summer was not in contact with anyone because of her long, reclusive life, the police suspicions fell only on the Inman family. They were found in the house of Bill's mother in a neighboring town. All 3 said that they had not heard anything about the disappearance, and on the day of the kidnapping, they were in Cleveland, where they wanted to find a new home. At that time, a GPS receiver was taken from the car. During the inspection, it was determined that it had been turned off during the period of Summer's abduction. The police also decided to check the Inman family's cell phones, which revealed that the family had not left Logan that night. Police soon received additional information that at 7:30 a.m. the morning of Summer's disappearance, the white Ford had stopped by a car wash where all 3 of them, Bill, Sandra, and Will, were dry cleaning the interior. The whole family was detained and taken in for questioning. Bill, who was already being led away under the arms of the police, shouted to his elderly mother that they were not guilty of anything, that it was the work of the devil against whom he and his parishioners were fighting. At the police station, the Inmans, as if bewitched, repeated the same thing, and only when it became clear that they had no alibi and they were facing execution, Sandra took the blame. From Sandra Inman's testimony, "Kidnapping Summer was my idea. It was my idea, and I was driving the white Ford that night. Of course, neither of us planned to kill Summer. I swear it was an accident. On the night of March 22nd, we drove up to the bank where Summer worked and waited a long time for her to finally finish her shift. At about 11 p.m., we saw her near the garbage cans near the bank. I drove up to her and my husband Bill and son Will, who hid their faces under black masks, pushed Summer into the car. Again, we had no intention of killing her. The only thing we wanted was for her to let us see the kids since we are family." Will, in an act of intimidation, tied Summer's hands and feet with plastic ties to keep her from running away. Apparently, one of the ties he tightened around her neck, he overestimated his strength, and Summer began to choke, and her face began to turn red. Will wanted to cut the tie, but he couldn't find a knife, and the knife we were taking with us had gotten under my seat, and when he did find it, it was too late. Summer was dead. Sandra Inman showed the place where they hid Summer's body. It was an old well near the Tabernacle of Faith Church. Yes, the same church where Bill and Sandra had first met, and then Will and Summer, the church where both had gotten married and where they'd gone to pray and confess for years. The autopsy confirmed Sandra's words. Summer had indeed died of asphyxiation. No other injuries were found on her body. In 2012, the court sentenced Bill Inman and Will Inman to life in prison, and Sandra Inman, despite taking all the blame, also received a life sentence, but the court allowed her to request parole after 15 years. Why is that? Apparently because, according to relatives, the women in the Inman family never decided anything. The whole family obediently obeyed only Bill, and if it was someone's cruel plan to regain custody of the children, it was his. And Sandra took the blame to save her husband and son, but she never succeeded. It's often said that life really begins after 40. A wealth of life experience contributes to this. For some, maturity marks a period of gaining self-confidence because not everyone has lived their life the way they wanted. For example, some people didn't know themselves or their true desires, so they followed others' advice instead. Or they might have chosen the wrong life partner. A fear of social judgment often led to taking the path of least resistance. Sometimes with age and the realization that half of one's life has passed comes the liberation from old fears and complexes. For such individuals, turning 40 is a sort of blossoming. Once the kids are grown, they can spend more time on themselves, leave past relationships behind, and try to start new ones. Channon Starbuck, a 42-year-old woman in our story today, believed this as well. But her new hopes did not come to fruition. On December 3, 2011, Channon was found on the bedroom floor of her own home. She was lying on her back in a provocative pose. On her stomach was an erotic massager. It was clear that someone wanted to posthumously disgrace her. There was no doubt among the police that she had been criminally taken from life. Her body bore bruises and scrapes everywhere. Later, a medical examiner reported that some injuries were caused by the use of a stun gun. Other evidence suggested her body had been moved. However, the cause of Channon's demise was strangulation. Detectives faced a tough task. They needed to establish the last hours of this mother of five's life and find the criminal. The disappearance of a mother of many. The police learned of the woman's lack of contact a day before the grim discovery. Initially, her ex-husband, Clay Starbuck, raised the alarm. The 47-year-old man reported he had been unable to contact his wife since December 1st. Around 3 p.m., Channon texted her daughter that she was unable to pick up the kids from school due to feeling unwell and asked to wait for their father, whom she supposedly had informed of the change in plans. However, his phone was off, so he was unaware of the situation. Marshall and Serena, the younger brother and sister, were tired and hungry. Therefore, the 15-year-old Logan decided to call her older brother. She asked him to drive them to their father's house, located a couple of blocks from their home. Upon arrival, Austin reported that he too could not get in touch with their mother. Perhaps she had turned off her phone to rest and recover. The boy put the kids in the car and drove them to Clay's house. The man was not expecting them, but was genuinely pleased by the unexpected circumstances. After the divorce, the older children had stayed with him, and the 3 youngest with their mother. Therefore, the father decided to enjoy their company and did not disturb Channon. Moreover, such incidents had happened before with her. Besides, he expected to see his former wife at the school basketball game that evening, but she never showed up. On December 2nd, Mr. Starbuck drove the children to school and headed to his ex-wife's home. The front door was locked, and the blinds were drawn. Since he didn't have a spare key, he tried to enter, but was unsuccessful. Clay then sent a message stating that if Channon did not show up by 7 p.m., he would contact the law enforcement. After waiting until the agreed time, he went to the police and explained the situation. 2 sheriff's deputies went to the provided address, but, finding nothing suspicious, returned. The officers suggested waiting another day. If she didn't make contact by then, he should come back. Disappointed, Clay went home and waited for news. The next day, he went to the station again. Unexpectedly, they told him that his wasn't the only report. A friend and Channon's mother had also been unable to reach her. This was uncharacteristic of her. This time, the police approached the case more responsibly. 48 hours had passed since Mrs. Starbuck's disappearance, and several people were concerned. After obtaining the necessary permission, the police went to her home again. What secrets did Mrs. Starbuck's home hold? Upon arriving at the residence, officers broke the lock and entered. There were no signs of a break-in or robbery. At first glance, everything was in its place. However, the idyll was disrupted as soon as they entered the woman's bedroom. That's where the grim truth was revealed. Channon Starbuck hadn't just disappeared, she had been brutally ended. It appeared she had just gotten up. Her bed was unmade, the blanket lay nearby. The sheet was missing from the bed, and the mattress cover was stained red. The deceased's cell phone and diary were on the dresser. Forensic experts focused their attention on her room. They examined all available surfaces for fingerprints. Some had been wiped clean, but 12 latent prints were found on the massager's box and the bathroom mirror. Numerous traces were also found in common areas. For further DNA analysis, specialists took scrapings from under the nails, face, and neck of the body. Detectives suspected that the homeowner had been deprived of life after she got out of the shower, was then moved to the bed, and eventually dragged to the floor. Notably, the removed sheets were found in the washing machine. Perhaps the perpetrator wanted to remove evidence in this way. Clay sheds light on his ex-wife's lifestyle. By noon, Clay arrived at Channon's house. He was eager to find out what had happened. The scene in his ex-wife's yard did not inspire positive thoughts. The perimeter of the building was cordoned off with yellow tape, and an ambulance and several police cars were parked near the lawn. Mr. Starbuck was the first to be informed of the woman's tragic end. The detectives needed to gather any information about the victim and her lifestyle. Therefore, after the ex-husband managed to calm down a bit, they questioned him. He explained that they had an arrangement. Every morning he picked up the younger kids and took them to school, and she picked them up after school. However, this routine was sometimes disrupted. That happened on the morning of December 1st, when his car broke down a couple of blocks from home. Usually, waking up early, he would drive around the neighborhood and warm up the car. That time, Clay texted Channon and asked her to take the kids to school. He then went home to wait for it to warm up. Around 11 a.m., he tried to start the car again, but once more, it wouldn't start. Giving up, he went back inside to nap. Mr. Starbuck didn't notice as he slept for several hours. During that time, his cell phone died. To substantiate his claims, he showed the correspondence with his ex-wife. At first glance, everything added up. Moreover, Clay was very cooperative, handing over his cell phone, DNA material, and fingerprints. He also confessed that he had been worried about Channon because the divorce had changed her and made her more vulnerable. When officers asked him to elaborate, he shared that, being single, the woman had registered on a dating site. As she remained attractive, she had a wide circle of admirers. According to Clay, she might have been seeing some of them simultaneously. Following his logic, one of these lovers might have sent Channon to the afterlife. Unfortunately, he couldn't name anyone, as he didn't have such information. Throughout the conversation, Starbuck desperately cried. He explained that it was difficult for him to accept the fact of his former lover's death and to speak of her in the past tense. After recording his statement, the officers sent the man home. Poor guy had to tell the children about their mother's death. Beginning of the investigation. The case involving Channon Starbuck's demise was gathering momentum. Investigators questioned the Starbuck family's neighbors, focusing on every detail, especially reports of unfamiliar people and vehicles in recent weeks. An autopsy confirmed a chest trauma consistent with the use of a stun gun and also revealed that she had 10 broken ribs. The injuries inflicted upon her head and body were severe and likely caused by a blunt object. The external appearance of the injuries made it difficult to determine the exact time of death. The expert estimated that her life was ended sometime between December 1st and 2. Scratches on her body suggested she had been moved. Because her neck bone was broken, the medical examiner stated that something soft was used during the act of strangulation, possibly a hand, a towel, or even a sheet. A slight clarity in the case emerged from the body samples taken, including male DNA, suggesting that the suspect might be among her close male acquaintances, starting from her ex-husband to secret admirers. Channon's darker side. Hoping to catch his former wife's perpetrator quickly, Clay Starbuck cooperated fully with the investigation. He underwent an examination during which he agreed to document any injuries and damages. Detectives speculated that the perpetrator might also have sustained injuries during the struggle. However, no such injuries were found on Clay's hands. Following him, the 21-year-old Austin and 18-year-old Blake were also examined. Questions arose only regarding the older son, whose hands bore old cuts, but these were attributed to his job in a window manufacturing plant. During conversations with the children, some facts were established that were later clarified. Many of them knew that after the divorce, their mother often went on dates with men and did not approve of it. The teenagers had even seen explicit photos on her laptop, which led them to speculate that she might have been targeted by a predator operating online. It was clear that everyone loved their mother and were deeply shaken by her departure. However, they disagreed with the changes in her life. In a follow-up interview, Clay was more articulate. He blamed Channon for the family discord. While he was away on business trips, she frequently saw other men. He even admitted that he suspected that Marshall might not be his son. Nevertheless, he loved him as his own. In his view, after their relationship ended, Channon started to indulge excessively and not appropriate for her age. He disapproved of how she would drop the kids off at his place when going on another date, among other things. However, by this point, the investigators had managed not only to talk to him and the children. Having interviewed Channon's relatives and some friends, the detectives formed their own picture of the deceased and her family. The rise and fall of the Starbuck family. Channon was born on April 19, 1969, in Anderson, Indiana. She was the youngest in her family, spending her childhood with two brothers. Over time, her parents divorced and started new families, giving her additional siblings. From a young age, Channon dreamt of creating a large and loving family of her own, a vision strengthened by her active participation in church and deep faith. She grew up modest and kind-hearted, with a passion for drawing, which earned her numerous awards and prizes. At the age of 20, she met 25-year-old Clay Starbuck. Their paths crossed in Florida, where Channon had moved with her family in her youth. Clay, originally from Alaska, was vacationing in one of the warmer states. They met at a party hosted by mutual friends and immediately took to each other. That evening, Channon learned a lot about Clay, including that he had continued his education at a school for diesel mechanics in Colorado after high school, then returned home to work on the Trans-Alaskan pipeline, making a good living. However, she discovered he was already married and had two beautiful children from that union. Channon was not deterred by his complicated past. In fact, she saw it as a positive, believing that it gave him valuable experience for married life. The couple married soon after. The newly minted Mrs. Starbuck moved in with her husband, initially struggling to adapt to the new environment and weather, but quickly settling in. However, married life wasn't as idyllic as Channon had hoped, with Clay often away, leaving her to manage the household alone. Yet love gave her strength, knowing that his work shifts would eventually end, and he would be back by her side. Meanwhile, she embraced motherhood with his children from his first marriage. It wasn't long before they had their own children together, first a son named Austin, and 3 years later, a brother for him named Blake. In 1996, their family grew again with the birth of a much-awaited daughter, Logan. But with Logan came challenges. She was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at a young age. Channon embraced her daughter's diagnosis with grace and became her best friend. Later, another daughter brightened the Starbucks' life, whom Clay named Serena. Channon devoted her time to her children, overseeing their health, education, and church teachings. She was known throughout the community for her hobbies, cooking, and crafts. Yet, she was so immersed in her role as a caring mother and loving wife that she didn't notice when her husband began an affair at work. This was a tremendous shock to her, perceived as a deep betrayal. Consequently, in 2000, she filed for divorce, marking a new chapter in her life. Still harboring feelings for her ex-husband, she decided to move to Arizona to dull the pain of their painful separation by starting a relationship with another man. However, this attempt failed as Channon realized she still loved Clay, who was also reaching out, asking her to return. Convinced he had repented, she gave him a second chance. In 2001, the couple welcomed their son Marshall, their fifth child. Yet, instead of solidifying their marriage, he became a new point of contention. Even a formal remarriage in 2006 could not save their fractured relationship. Awakening. 6 months later, they moved to Deer Park in Spokane County, Washington. Clay found a suitable house for their large family. He continued to work at his previous job, so he was away most of the time. Channon, left to manage the household and kids on her own, took them to movies, theaters, and parks, and organized home parties. However, doubts and distrust poisoned their marriage, further impacted by the long separations and breaks in their relationship. Ultimately, in 2010, the couple permanently separated. Crossing into her 40s, Channon began to rebuild her life, holding on to hope that she might still experience the joy of love. She resolved never to give up or repeat past mistakes. Even when Clay suffered a serious injury, she chose not to return to him. Nonetheless, she supported her ex-husband and provided whatever help she could. In February 2011, Clay left his job and settled permanently in Deer Park, staying close not just to his children, but to Channon as well. He still hoped she would return, but she did not share his view, and finally finding freedom, she enjoyed it. After undergoing surgery, Austin and Blake moved in with their father, happy to be away from under their mother's constant supervision. Channon, breathing new life, found a part-time job and enrolled in a dental assistant course. Tired of being a housewife and needing to support her family, especially as her ex-husband stopped paying child support due to his illness, she still had him nearby for emergencies. The children stayed with him after school every Wednesday, as well as the second and fourth weekends of the month. That summer, Channon proudly received her certification, marking off one dream and starting to pursue another. Hoping to meet a worthy man, she created a profile on a dating site, feeling a keen need to live for herself. She also regretted spending her best years on a man who did not appreciate her and was capable of deceit. However, a criminal plan one December morning ended her dreams. Channon Starbuck's funeral took place on December 10, 2011. A large number of people who came to the service testified to her being a bright and sincere person. She found her final resting place at a cemetery in Orlando. Search for the culprit. Public attention to the woman's death spurred law enforcement to move quickly. While focusing on her ex-husband, detectives decided to verify his alibi. As a result, they retraced Clay's movements on December 1st. He once again explained what had happened that morning and detailed where and how his car had broken down. Additionally, the results of the initial examination came in. Starbuck's fingerprints did not match any found at the crime scene. This led to a decision to check him against existing databases while also focusing on Channon's mobile phone, laptop, and personal diary. At the same time, they explored the possibility of other people being involved in the crime. After carefully examining Mrs. Starbuck's mobile phone, detectives added several names to the list of suspects. Men she had communicated with on the dating site raised suspicions. One, Tom Walker, had scheduled a date with her on December 5th. Hours before her demise, they had candid conversations and exchanged photos. Tom had asked Channon to take a photo using an adult toy, which she refused. Notably, her body was later found in the exact pose mentioned by Tom. Within an hour, Walker was located. He was shocked not only by the news, but also by being considered a suspect. He immediately explained his activities on the day of her death, which were confirmed by colleagues and surveillance cameras. Next on the list was John Wilson, who had scheduled a meeting with Channon on December 1st. From their correspondence, it was clear he was not looking for a serious relationship. Their interaction was merely casual. It also turned out that the suitor had used a fake name. His real name was John Kenlane. He worked in a completely different field than he had claimed and was married, hence the secrecy. On the day of the crime, Channon postponed their morning meeting to a later time, citing headaches. Eventually, the date did not take place. After taking a DNA sample from him, he was released. His alibi was corroborated, even as his deception was revealed to his family. Critical evidence. After these developments, the investigation reverted to square one. While examining Channon's mobile phone, detectives made a request to the cellular service provider, uncovering another significant detail. It turned out that a 911 call was made from the victim's phone at 9:18 a.m. on the morning of December 1st, but the suspect deleted it from the call log. Thanks to a request to the emergency services, the 30-second call was retrieved. Unfortunately, it contained nothing but sobs and rustling sounds before abruptly cutting off. It was also discovered that after the failed call, the call center operator tried to return the call, but it went to voicemail. According to GPS data, Channon's mobile device was located at her home, pinpointing the exact date of her demise. She had been deprived of life after dropping her kids at school and returning home. This meant that the 11 messages sent afterward were not sent by her. The suspect tried to confuse the investigation. Moreover, he was close to the Starbuck family, as he used a nickname for the youngest son, calling him Marsh in the correspondence. After this information, Clay's statements underwent further scrutiny. He had sufficient motive for ending his ex-wife's life, divorce. Not all partners accept new realities with dignity. Moreover, he had a perfect opportunity, knowing her daily routine. Thus, authorities decided to again track the suspect's car route, this time using street surveillance camera recordings. This is where officers' suspicions took shape. Starbuck's car had not broken down. Concurrently, results from another analysis arrived. DNA material collected from Channon's body matched the suspect's samples exactly. Harsh reprisal. The scenario unfolded as follows. On the morning of December 1st, Clay sent a message to his ex-wife asking her to take the kids to school, fabricating a car breakdown. While she was out, he entered the house and waited. During this time, he accessed her unprotected laptop and found personal correspondences that infuriated the already jealous Starbuck. When Channon returned, a heated argument ensued, which ultimately led to bloodshed. This explained the unusual pose in which the deceased was found, an act of vengeance for her newfound freedom. Afterward, Clay stayed in the house, impersonating her in text exchanges. His intentions to harm his ex-wife might have been long-standing. Now, a friend's words to detectives took on new meaning. During a conversation, she mentioned that Clay and Channon's relationship was far from what it seemed. Channon had confessed in candid conversations that she was tired of his constant control and criticisms. Daring to divorce, she feared he might harm her someday. From June to November 2011, she had repeatedly contacted the police, claiming her ex-husband was stalking her. She felt unsafe even in her own home, hence did not trust anyone with the keys. Ultimately, she managed to secure a restraining order against Clay, so their communications were confined to text messages. Careful examination of Mrs. Starbuck's diary made it evident that she not only feared her former lover, but believed he was turning the children against her. He concocted vile stories and portrayed her as promiscuous. Thus, the children's reaction to their father's arrest on February 6, 2012, was not surprising. They refused to believe in his involvement. They were not perturbed by the fact that a tracking program was found on their mother's laptop and a hard drive labeled Channon's desktop computer in their father's house, along with printed correspondences. The older children doubted the authenticity of the DNA analysis, believing the accusation against their father was far-fetched and the case fabricated. However, the views of law enforcement and other relatives differed. Triumph of truth and justice. At the trial, the prosecution was confident in the man's guilt, supported by a substantial amount of physical evidence and testimonies. In June 2013, justice prevailed. Clay Starbuck was found guilty of first-degree deprivation of life under aggravating circumstances and disrespect to human remains. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In 2015, Clay's attorney filed an appeal against the verdict, but it was rejected. To this day, the perpetrator remains behind bars at the Airway Heights Corrections Center in Spokane County. Channon's relatives mourn the woman's untimely departure profoundly. Yet, their hearts are even more shattered by the thought that the children sided with their father. He was so obsessed with his ex-wife that in seeking revenge, he forgot about the consequences. Unable to accept his new reality, he left his children effectively orphaned. On September 27, 2020, a man called emergency services around 6 p.m. Lamantine County dispatchers recorded the call in which the man said a neighbor woman ran up to his house screaming for help. She claimed she was fleeing from her husband who had just attacked her in the house. The woman was crying continuously, but she did not look like a victim at all because she was holding a gun. Police officers who arrived on the scene found the husband's attacker alive in the bedroom with 2 gunshot wounds. One was to the leg and the other to the chest. The bullet also grazed the right arm. 2 more bullets were found in the wall, as well as 4 shell casings from a .45 caliber pistol were near the injured man. The victim was taken to a local hospital where he died of his injuries an hour later. Police officers thoroughly examined the scene of the tragedy and interviewed the woman, but she did not make contact with law enforcement. She was not arrested that night, and detectives began investigating her claim of self-defense. The injured woman turned out to be Ashley Benefield, and the man who was killed was her husband, Douglas Benefield. But let's find out how events really unfolded that day, and could Ashley really have saved herself only by shooting her husband? Our story begins in sunny Florida in August 2016. Ashley Byers and Douglas Benefield met at a Republican fundraising event in Palm Beach. The man was so charmed by the young girl that he asked for her phone number after dinner. That same evening, their romantic correspondence began. At the time of their acquaintance, 24-year-old Ashley Byers worked in the campaign headquarters of Donald Trump in Sarasota. Her job was to encourage evangelicals to vote and hold rallies. In addition to her political activities, Ashley was also an aspiring model and dancer with the Maryland Youth Ballet, where she occasionally performed. However, Ashley dreamed of becoming a famous ballerina and starting her own ballet company. Douglas Benefield was 30 years older than Ashley. He was originally from Charleston, a former Navy pilot and a successful consultant who worked with technology companies and defense contractors. He was also involved in real estate and the restaurant business. Douglas was widowed about a year ago and single-handedly raised his 15-year-old daughter, Ava. The grown man and the young girl were brought together by conservative values and a love of guns. Despite the large age difference between them, immediately sparked sparks, and after only 13 days, they got married. A modest celebration was held in Douglas's hometown of Charleston. Among the invited guests was only Douglas's friend, Trip Cormany, who was an ordained Episcopal pastor at the time. Trip wasn't thrilled and resented what he considered too short a time for them to have known each other, but agreed to perform the ceremony, for Douglas was deeply religious, so he wanted to marry Ashley before he became intimate with her. For the rest of the couple's family and friends, the wedding was a surprise. Douglas did not even invite his daughter to the wedding. Eva Benefield was 15 years old at the time and was still taking the trauma of losing her mom hard. Just 9 months ago, Eva came home from school and discovered the dead body of her mother, Renee. She had died of an undiagnosed heart condition. Eva was stunned by her father's sudden marriage to a girl who was only 9 years older than her. After Ashley moved into Douglas's home in Charleston, the relationship between her and Eva did not work out, which became an occasion for regular quarrels and scandals within the family. The close father-daughter relationship suffered greatly because of Douglas's new wife. Ashley did not want to become a stepmother or just a friend for her husband's daughter. Eva, on the other hand, felt that she was simply losing her father. Ashley Benefield dreamed of creating a ballet company, which would include dancers of all nationalities with any physique, and Douglas promised to make his wife's dream a reality. He idolized his young wife. Douglas constantly arranged romantic dates and surprises for Ashley, giving her flowers and telling her she was the most beautiful. Tall, slender, and graceful Ashley, like a swan, really, charmed everyone who knew her. Her blue eyes radiated kindness, her long brown hair, like plumage for a bird, added beauty and glamour. Douglas saw only spiritual purity in his Ashley and was willing to do anything for her. So soon, her dream came true. Combining Ashley's passion for ballet with Douglas's business savvy, they founded the American National Ballet in Charleston and advertised to screen ballet dancers from all over the country. The goal was to run a non-profit ballet company and for-profit school. In the summer of 2017, Ashley and Douglas began holding the first auditions. But in addition to starting a ballet company, Ashley also dreamed of becoming a mother and was planning a pregnancy. This is exactly what happened in the midst of creating the ballet company. In the late summer of 2017, about 40 dancers from around the world began arriving in Charleston to work with Ashley. But she never showed up for another audition. All the work fell on Douglas's shoulders. Douglas hired ballet master Michael Wise to train the dancers. But it was Ashley who many dancers were waiting for. But she wasn't planning on doing ballet anytime soon, citing a serious condition due to her pregnancy. Despite the growing tension between Ashley and Eva, Douglas continued to help his wife follow her dream, to start a ballet company in Charleston with a unique mission. The man, who is quite distant from ballet with the help of hired choreographers and managers, tried to run the business on his own. But the company soon ran into legal trouble after being sued by dancers and choreographers who accused the couple of breach of contract, claiming they were fired just weeks after being hired. After leaving, Ashley Douglas brought in new managers in hopes of getting the ballet up and running, but they made drastic changes, and Ashley's original vision of dancers of all ethnicities failed. Douglas was so preoccupied with the ballet that he didn't notice how tensions between Ashley and Eva continued to mount. One day after Douglas and Ashley argued over Eva, he lost his temper and fired a gun into the ceiling of their home. Those who knew him said it was uncharacteristic of the calm and non-confrontational Douglas. In late August, citing a difficult pregnancy, Ashley returned to Florida to her mother, while Douglas was still trying to establish the work of the ballet in Charleston. On October 23, 2017, a group of dancers were called into a meeting, told to sign non-disclosure agreements, and fired. Online, Ashley spoke out against the rest of the company, including Douglas. "The new management has destroyed everything we've worked so hard for, and I cannot stand behind them or their actions," she reported. A&B was created to be different from any other dance company and should have set a new standard in how it treats its dancers. Everyone involved should be ashamed of how it was handled. It seemed as if a great idea had dissipated like smoke. A few months later, the American National Ballet was finished for good. At the conclusion of the ballet case, Douglas had lost over $100,000. His ballet nightmare was over. Douglas threw a farewell party for A&B, as he had worked closely with many dancers for a long time. However, when he returned home, it was not his pregnant wife who was waiting for him, but a farewell note. In her 4-page letter, Ashley listed all of Douglas's shortcomings and called his attitude towards her possessive and controlling. She wrote that the incident where he fired a gun into the ceiling had made her fear for her life and the safety of her unborn child, so she had to leave him. His heart was broken. But as it later turned out, Ashley's note was only the beginning. The months that followed were even more difficult for Douglas, as he was faced with a blow from the man who was dear to him. In late November 2017, Douglas, still hoping for reconciliation, sent Ashley a birthday present. He knew how much his wife loved tea. He bought a beautiful teapot, cups and saucers, and a specialty tea designed for pregnant women. Ashley accepted the gift, but she wasn't going to put up with it. Instead, she filed a series of charges against Douglas. Among them was poisoning her with her tea. Her claims were investigated, but nothing was found to substantiate such grave accusations. But Ashley didn't stop there and sent her hair to an independent lab for analysis to determine if she had been poisoned. The report stated that her hair contained higher than normal levels of aluminum, zinc, and other metals. 3 weeks before giving birth, without Douglas's knowledge, Ashley went into the hospital. She was at Tampa General Hospital. The woman was very frightened and claimed that the baby had been intrauterine exposure to heavy metals because her husband had poisoned her. Ashley went on to accuse Douglas of physical abuse without evidence. She also claimed that he held her captive in his Charleston home. Even though Douglas was hundreds of miles away, she still claimed he was stalking her everywhere, starting in Florida. With no way to know if what Ashley told hospital staff was true, management took precautions for her safety and gave her a new name, Christina. 3 days later, doctors performed a C-section. The baby girl was healthy, but Ashley continued to worry that her baby had been poisoned. Douglas, however, wasn't ready to give up. He sent Ashley text after text begging her to change her mind. After all, he believed he still had a family that he thought would be perfect, happy, and faithful, but it had fallen apart in the most questionable way. Ashley was in no mood to forgive Douglas, much less go back. She decided to go to the authorities and add a new batch of accusations in her husband's direction. She reported Douglas's mistreatment of his oldest daughter, Eva, and brought in Florida Child Protective Services to check it out. Ashley told police that Douglas had anger issues and told all about the day he fired a gun in the house. Investigators interviewed Eva, so also Douglas was interviewed and that gun incident was investigated, but in the end, Douglas was exonerated. He was examined by a psychologist who did a full psychological evaluation, which showed that Douglas was perfectly fine and not dangerous. Ashley couldn't believe it, and once again wrote a long letter to Douglas. The lines at the end made it clear for him not to hit on her or try to stalk her, or it would end up with the police again. She didn't look like a person ready to resume a relationship. Another scathing note to Ashley Douglas left no doubt about her feelings. In the summer of 2018, the poisoning allegations came to a head when Ashley and Douglas met in a Bradenton courtroom. Douglas wanted to see his newborn daughter, while Ashley asked for a restraining order. But the judge was not convinced by 2 days of testimony and lab test results presented by Ashley. Judge Diane Moreland declared that there was not the slightest credible evidence that Miss Benefield had ever been poisoned or suffered from any illness caused by any poison. This ruling opened the door for Douglas to finally see his daughter. A few days later, he and Ashley met outside the sheriff's office so the father could see the child. To the surprise of those around them, Ashley was suddenly very cooperative. She then immediately went straight to Douglas, handed the baby over very cordially. She even offered to spend time with the three of them. For most of the next year, Douglas, Ashley, and their daughter seemed happy. Douglas even moved into a neighboring apartment in Florida, so he wouldn't disturb Ashley's peace and still be close to them. But in August 2019, when he met Ashley to pick up his daughter, was stunned to see an engagement ring on his wife's finger. He hired a private investigator to find out what was going on. The private investigator informed Douglas that Ashley was dating another man, and in November 2019, the man filed for divorce. Shortly afterward, Ashley began filing complaints against Douglas Benefield again. Ashley accused him of indecent behavior towards his young daughter. She accused him of a number of terrible things. Douglas adamantly denied harming his daughter, and authorities accepted the lack of evidence. Then, in March 2020, Douglas wrote an email to the sheriff's office accusing Ashley of having a split personality. But a few months later, Douglas did what seemed unthinkable. In a dizzying move, he announced that he and Ashley were going to try to be a family again and were moving to Maryland. Friends held their breath, but hoped for the sake of their young daughter that her parents' miraculous reunion was about to happen. On September 27, 2020, Douglas Benefield was preparing to start a new life. He was moving with Ashley, their young daughter, and Ashley's mother, Alicia, from Florida to Maryland. So let's pretend it's Sunday night. The time is about 5:30 in the evening. Ashley meets Douglas to start packing for the move. Douglas and Ashley are at Alicia's house, happily packing. Alicia decides to take a walk with the baby to a nearby park. Ashley is left alone with Douglas. They talk, but suddenly Ashley announces that they are moving without him. Douglas was angry. He yelled that they would move in together as a family and start a new life. The man began moving filled boxes in a rage. Ashley Benefield tried to leave the house, but Douglas allegedly grabbed her left arm, yanked her back, and asked where she was going. He threatened her with his index finger like a naughty child with the words, "You can't leave me." But for Ashley, it was enough to make her fear for her life once again. Ashley Benefield ran into her bedroom and grabbed the gun she legally owned. She pointed the gun at Douglas and ordered him to leave her alone and leave the house. Douglas did not stop and continued walking toward Ashley, hoping to calm her down. As he continued toward her, she began shooting. Ashley saw Douglas fall, and his legs lifted into the air as his feet slipped out from under him, and he suddenly collapsed. The woman ran to the neighbor's house screaming for help. 2 neighbors on a dog walk saw her running outside with a gun, crying and screaming. However, only Ashley knows exactly what really happened that night in the house, but she has not made any statements. 5 weeks after the shooting, Ashley was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. She pleaded not guilty. She was released on bail after spending about 2 weeks in jail. Ashley began cooperating with authorities on November 4th, 2020. At that time, she was formally arrested and charged with second-degree murder. She is currently being held without bail pending a future court date. In February 2023, Ashley Benefield's defense filed a motion to dismiss the case, arguing that she shot her husband in self-defense. The 105-page motion outlines her side of the story, explaining what led to the fatal shooting. Ashley Benefield's attorney, Neil Taylor, said the motion is in part their attempt to shed light on her side of the story. In the motion to dismiss, Ashley Benefield's attorneys added evidence, documents, and photos to support their case. These include photos of Douglas Benefield that show his impeccable physique and strength, as well as a cut on the side of Ashley Benefield's body that she allegedly received from a moving box that Douglas was moving in her direction. Another photo of Ashley Benefield with a black eye. The defense claims the photos of her injuries were taken the day of the shooting. Defense attorneys have tried every way they can to implicate Douglas of cruelty and uncontrolled aggression, adding to the case with a long-standing admission that he punched their dog and punched a hole in the wall. In July 2018, he allegedly admitted to pulling a gun out of his sleeve and shooting at the ceiling, even throwing the gun at a wall, in an attempt to silence Ashley Benefield during an argument. During the initial hearing, Assistant State's Attorneys Suzanne O'Donnell and Rebecca Friel, as well as Ashley Benefield's attorney Neil Taylor, argued whether Ashley Benefield's actions the night she fired a gun at Doug Benefield were self-defense. A Lamantine County judge denied a motion to dismiss the case against Ashley, who was accused of killing her ex-husband nearly 2 months after she appeared in court for a hearing. Circuit Court Judge Stephen White said the totality of the evidence presented during the hearing showed that the state proved that the killing of Douglas Benefield was not a single act of necessary self-defense, but instead was the culmination of a long, concerted effort by Ashley Benefield. The ruling rejected the defense's version of what happened and agreed with the state that probable cause existed to continue the case. The competent and substantial evidence presented by the state clearly and convincingly demonstrates that the defendant is not entitled to judicial immunity from prosecution because she was not justified in using deadly force against the victim on September 27, 2020, Judge White wrote in the ruling. So Ashley Benefield was denied dismissal of the case and immunity. The evidence presented in court was not enough to convince the prosecutor and the court to shoot. Court documents state that on that fateful day of September 27, 2020, Douglas Benefield went to visit his child at the Lakewood Ranch home where the suspect was staying with her mother. An argument ensued, resulting in him being shot. He later died from his injuries at a local hospital. Ashley Benefield claimed Douglas grabbed her and began hitting her when she tried to leave. Authorities' affidavit states that based on the entry wounds on Douglas's body, he was not facing Ashley when she began shooting. He also did not take any defensive position. Douglas was not found to have any weapon on or near him, but as detectives investigated, Ashley's claim of self-defense became problematic. Apparently, the man didn't even expect his beloved wife to shoot him. Ashley Benefield insists she is innocent and awaiting trial. She has not yet pleaded guilty. To date, there are many unanswered questions surrounding Douglas and Ashley's marriage. All we know is that by her own admission, she did shoot her husband and caused his death. Is it possible that Ashley was really afraid of Douglas and was prepared to defend herself at any time of the day or night? Of course, she could have been afraid of him. Fear is one of the strongest human emotions that is easily controlled and manipulated, but it's impossible to be afraid of something that isn't there. Ashley had lived in an invented fear for years and constantly expected to be attacked. She killed her husband for threatening her with a finger in her face. It sounds very much like paranoia when, along with the poisoning complaints, it was worth having not only Douglas, but Ashley checked out by a psychologist. It's hard to know if Ashley was a victim or a skillful manipulator. In the end, Ashley was charged with second-degree murder and is currently still awaiting trial. Florida Stand Your Ground law allows a person to use or threaten to use deadly force against another person if they reasonably believe they need to defend themselves from an immediate threat and they have no need to retreat. This means that if a person in Florida believes that he or she is in serious danger of being injured or killed and is not engaged in criminal activity, he or she has the right to defend himself or herself. Unlike traditional self-defense laws, a person must not try to get away from an attacker first. Now that the defense has invoked Stand Your Ground, the burden is on the prosecution to prove the shooting was not justified. Taylor said he expects District Court Judge Stephen White to give the prosecution enough time to read and understand the motion before setting a date for another hearing. To Douglas Benefield, Ashley was that innocent, pure white swan, the epitome of gentleness and purity. But beneath those white feathers was an evil woman. She's the black swan. A crime of honor committed by close relatives. A crime of honor is a severe criminal act, typically, but not necessarily, committed against a female family member as punishment for bringing disgrace and dishonor upon the family. The offenses punishable by death at the hands of relatives can vary across different countries and cultures, but often include marital infidelity and apostasy. Each year, according to official statistics, around 5,000 such crimes occur worldwide. However, various women's rights organizations claim this number is at least 4 times underreported. What is most alarming is that often, the perpetrators face no punishment, and their actions are deemed righteous. Police in countries where such crimes are prevalent simply turn a blind eye to these acts, and although it is claimed that in recent years the penalties for such actions have been intensified, there are no official data to substantiate this. Sami Shahed's case in 2016 shocked the world. She was forcibly married off to a cousin she openly despised and sent to her ancestral homeland. However, she soon broke off this imposed union to marry for love, against her relatives' wishes, and paid the ultimate price for it. Her story drew intense public scrutiny as she was a British citizen of Pakistani descent. Yet she met her tragic end in Pakistan, where the case was quickly suppressed, attempting to frame it as an unfortunate accident. The Shahed family story. Chaudhry Mohammed Shahed and Matiaz Shahed emigrated to the UK in the mid-1980s from a small Pakistani village named Pandori, located in the Jhelum district of Punjab province. They moved to a foreign land in search of a better life to escape the poverty they lived in back home. In November 1987, their eldest daughter, Sami, was born in the English city of Bradford, located in West Yorkshire, and a few years later, her younger sister Mita was born. The head of the family established his own business renting cars, which later focused on renting luxury vehicles, including high-end limousines. As his business prospered, He helped two of his brothers and their families also move from Pakistan and settle in the UK. The relatives also opened and successfully developed their businesses. One brother had his own seafood shop chain by the early 2000s, and the other opened a flower delivery and floristry company. Overall, the Shahed family was quite well known and successful in Bradford, being quite wealthy and influential. Sisters Sami and Mita were born and raised in the UK, but their family strictly adhered to the laws and traditions of their ancestral country, so the girls grew up under the influence of a mix of European and Pakistani cultures and customs. The liberal English views and manners starkly contrasted with the strict orders of their ancestors' country. For example, the girls were not allowed to drive a car, and all their contacts and movements were strictly monitored by their father. The elder daughter, Sami, was the apple of Chaudhry Muhammad's eye and was considered daddy's girl. He indulged her in every way, buying her expensive outfits and jewelry, and paid for her education at one of the most prestigious universities. She meticulously cared for her appearance, used cosmetics from well-known brands, visited beauty salons, and spent extravagant amounts of money there. Meanwhile, she worked part-time at a post office, essentially supported by her father who paid for all her whims and desires. Frequently, Sami, without her family knowing, would rent a car and drive herself. She loved driving, felt confident behind the wheel, and did not understand why Pakistani traditions forbade women from doing so. She was headstrong and freedom-loving, but she tried not to upset her parents, doing everything as they said. Shahed had many friends from school and university in England with whom she kept in touch. She was characterized as a bright, kind, and cheerful person. Forced marriage. Despite living a life filled with love and abundance and seemingly having everything she wanted, the woman was deprived of the opportunity to make any decisions independently. She constantly lived with an eye towards her parents' and elder family members' opinions, from whom she needed constant approval for her actions. More than anything, Sami feared upsetting her father, whom she adored. However, numerous prohibitions, fears, and strict orders meant she was never truly honest with her family. In 2012, her parents decided it was time for their eldest daughter to settle down, get married, start her own family, and have children. They insisted that she go to Pakistan and enter into a marriage in accordance with all the rules and cultural traditions. They chose her cousin, Chaudhry Muhammad Shakil, whom she barely knew, as her groom. It's worth noting that marriages between relatives and arranged marriages are quite common, although not a strict requirement in Sunni Islam, but the tradition is honored to this day. Sami knew that sooner or later her parents would choose a husband for her and present it as a fait accompli, leaving her with no choice in the matter. She was prepared for this, understanding the inevitability of such a marriage, but her father's choice was truly shocking to her. Shakil was openly distasteful to her, even causing her some repulsion. Additionally, he had recently been released from prison where he served time for ending someone's life over a land dispute. Since childhood, Sami occasionally interacted with Shakil as if he were a brother, but she could never imagine him as her spouse. Notably, her own parents were also cousins whose marriage was arranged by relatives, but they managed to genuinely fall in love and build a happy family. Her parents believed that their daughter would experience the same fate and that she and Chaudhry would eventually fall in love. Despite her aversion to the groom, Sami could not disobey her father and understood how important this was to her family. However, her mother and younger sister Mita later claimed that no one forced her into the marriage, and given her complex and headstrong character, it would have been impossible to do so physically or morally. She married voluntarily, without any coercion. In early February 2012, the decision about the upcoming wedding was finalized at a family council. The following couple of weeks, her parents and aunt and uncle, future in-laws, took the bride shopping, where she chose everything she liked, and they paid for expensive outfits, jewelry, accessories, cosmetics, and so on. Sami was denied nothing, but it all seemed as if she was being purchased. Likely that was indeed the case. The bride pretended to be caught up in the wedding preparations, but inwardly she felt like a hostage. She already understood that this marriage would not bring her happiness but would be a real punishment. However, she could only discuss this with her friends, not her family. At home, she needed to appear happy, discuss the details of the upcoming celebration, and prepare for her departure to Pakistan. On February 20th, 2012, the young woman boarded a plane and, while in the cabin, sent a message to a close friend saying she was flying thousands of miles to make the biggest mistake of her life, but she had no choice. Later, she sent several more messages in which she confessed that the mere sight of the groom made her nauseous, and she could not stand to be near him. On February 27th, a lavish wedding was held for Sami and Chaudhry in Pandori, attended by about 1,000 people. The celebration lasted 4 days, and as a wedding gift, her parents presented the newlyweds with their own luxurious 2-story house, located next to their family home in the same province of Pandori. However, the young woman understood that this rich and beautiful house would become a real prison for her, where she would be forced to live with a man she did not love. Return to the United Kingdom. Family life, predictably, did not bring Sami happiness. She still detested her now lawful husband and realized she could neither love this man nor even grow accustomed to him. But 4 months later, in mid-June 2012, the young woman returned to her native Bradford to sort out some issues and help her husband with the immigration documents for obtaining British citizenship. She was supposed to apply for a spousal visa for Shaquille, but she was in no hurry with this, enjoying the illusion of freedom and the opportunity to not see her unloved husband for some time. When Sami finally started processing the documents, she learned that their wedding ceremony, conducted according to all the canons of Sharia, was just a marriage contract between Muslims, but had no legal force in the United Kingdom. To recognize such a marriage, certain measures under European laws were necessary, namely conducting a civil ceremony and obtaining an official document, a marriage certificate. Friends of Sami noticed changes in her character and behavior after returning from Pakistan. The young woman appeared sad, her eyes seemed extinguished. She was no longer the joyful and sociable person she used to be, and she clearly harbored deep resentment towards her parents. Any conversations or mentions of her husband and family life provoked irritation and anger in her. The issue was that Shackle was very jealous and tormented his wife, even from another country. He constantly called her and could demand at any time that she video chat with him. This was how the man controlled where his wife was, what she was doing, and who was with her. Moreover, this was, in a way, a demonstration of the husband's superiority and his power over the woman. In early August of the same year, during a phone conversation with a close friend, Sami confessed that her nerves were giving out. She was completely drained and no longer wanted to live because she had lost any joy, hope for happiness, and a bright future. She said she detested Chaudhry with all her soul and never wanted to see him again. However, she could not say this to her relatives. They only went around telling everyone about the luxurious wedding they had arranged for their eldest daughter. The very man. In early September, without having resolved the issues with the spousal visa, Sami was forced to return to Pakistan to her unloved husband. She regularly wrote to friends about how miserable she was, how much she hated her marriage, and how she felt trapped with no way out. This continued for several months, but then she began to complain less frequently, and her mood changed. During her next visit to the United Kingdom, it became clear what had caused this change. It turned out that she had met a young man online, Syed Mukhtar Kazim, who, like her, was a British citizen of Pakistani origin. He was born and raised in London but had been working and living in the United Arab Emirates for the last few years. The pair started corresponding and quickly developed romantic feelings. They secretly arranged a meeting, and in October 2013, they saw each other in person for the first time. Sami immediately realized that Syed was the man of her dreams, with whom she wanted to spend the rest of her life. He was kind, caring, attentive, and courted her beautifully. They had a lot in common, but they both understood how dangerous and risky their relationship was. Nevertheless, life only seemed meaningful to the young people when they were together. She openly told her beloved about the situation she was in and said she was ready to end her marriage to start anew with Shahed. However, she could not get a divorce through a British court because, according to local law, she was not married at all. Divorce and new marriage. In the spring of 2014, Shahed decided to speak with Shakil and asked him for a divorce, but he rudely refused, stating that she would belong to him until the end of her days. Then, during another visit to the United Kingdom to her parents, she secretly contacted a local Islamic Sharia council, reporting that she had been forced into marriage, which was a valid basis for annulling the marriage. She also converted from Sunni to the Shiite branch of Islam, which her new lover belonged to. The cleric contacted the woman's husband to hear his side regarding their marriage, but he again rudely refused to discuss his personal life, stating that he would not give permission for a divorce. After that, the Islamic Sharia Council of the United Kingdom dissolved the marriage, recognizing that Shahed had been coerced into it by family pressure. Sami's family members had no idea that she had divorced her husband in absentia and was preparing to remarry, now to the man she loved. In September 2014, the young woman secretly married her new chosen one. This time, the union had legal force, and the spouses received a certificate of registration of their relationship, confirming its legality. The same cleric who had granted permission to dissolve the bride's previous marriage conducted the Nikah religious ceremony. Only a few close friends of the newlyweds, who were present at their wedding, knew about this event. The couple was truly happy. Sami confessed to her friends that she felt like a princess in a fairy tale and couldn't believe that all this was happening in reality. However, this joyous and happy event was the beginning of a real nightmare: family dispute and escape from the country. When Shakil demanded that his wife return to Pakistan, she responded that she no longer belonged to him and presented a certificate of her new marriage. This infuriated the man, who immediately called his father-in-law to inform him of the situation, sparking a severe scandal. The family attempted to coerce her to return to her husband with threats, but she refused, which soon led to severe consequences. A few weeks later, Sami was brutally assaulted on the street while shopping with her sister. Notably, her sister was unharmed, but Sami nearly had her legs broken with metal bars. The police took her statement but failed to find the men responsible for the assault, and the case was quickly dismissed. At this time, Shahed had to fly to Dubai for work, leaving his wife in the United Kingdom awaiting a visa to follow him. The wait became a real torment for her, filled with endless threats, disputes with relatives, and fear for her life. Moreover, her parents tried to prove that their daughter's divorce from Shakil was invalid, and even caused a scene with the cleric who had married the lovers. Sami's mother was furious, insulting her daughter and saying that she had disgraced their family and would suffer terrible retribution. In the spring of 2015, Sami finally received her visa and was able to fly to her husband in Dubai. It felt more like an escape, as the young woman feared her family would do everything possible to keep her and forcibly return her to Pakistan. For several months, she kept her passport with friends who also bought her a plane ticket and accompanied her to the airport, a new life. The following year was the happiest in Sami's life. She enjoyed her freedom and the ability to make her own decisions, living with the man she loved, who adored her and was ready to carry her on his hands. Additionally, she could drive a car, something her parents and former husband would never have allowed her to do. In photos posted on social media, Sami was radiantly happy. She blossomed, looked more beautiful, and it was clear she had achieved what she had always dreamed of. Shahed wanted to become a mother as soon as possible, but sadly, this happiness was not meant to be for her. Nonetheless, she and her husband confidently looked to the future, making plans for their lives, unaware that her closest relatives had already condemned her. Immediately after their daughter's departure, her parents filed a missing persons report with the police, which they later wanted to reclassify as an abduction, accusing Kazim of the crime. The Shahed family members started devising a plan to force the young woman to return by any means necessary, considering various options. Threats no longer worked on her, but they could play on her sympathy. A sinister trap. In June 2016, Sami's parents conveyed tragic news. Her aunt, Shakil's mother, had passed away. Sami was devastated and even considered flying to Pakistan for the funeral, but she was aware of the risks involved. Many family members still hadn't accepted that she had left her unloved husband and remarried. Her actions were viewed as betrayal and disgrace. A week after the aunt's funeral, her mother called again, reporting that her father's health had severely deteriorated. He had diabetes, and his condition had recently become unstable. If he passed away, Sami knew she would never forgive herself if she didn't visit him. Despite her concerns and her husband's attempts to dissuade her, she decided to travel to Pandori. Fearing for her life and safety, she promised her husband to keep in constant contact with him. On July 14, 2016, Shahed arrived in Pakistan and first went to a close friend's house. She left her passport and return ticket to Dubai with her friend, shared her fears, noted her bad premonition, and asked her friend to pray for her safe return to Syed. The following few days passed relatively peacefully. She stayed in touch with her husband and friend, updating them on her movements. She visited her aunt's grave with her family and met with many relatives. She was scheduled to fly back to Dubai on July 21st. However, on July 20th, Sami suddenly stopped making contact. Tragic news. On July 20th, 2016, Chaudhry Mohammed Shahed called the police station to report the tragic death of his daughter. When law enforcement arrived at the house where Sami had lived with her first husband, they found her lifeless body at the bottom of the stairs. Unfortunately, it was too late to help her. There were several visible bruises on her body, which, according to her parents, she sustained from falling down the stairs, and a small amount of pinkish foam was found coming out of her mouth. According to her father, Sami likely had a heart problem, fell, and rolled down the stairs. Since no one was home at the time, she was not assisted promptly and she passed away. When asked about the whereabouts of the deceased's husband, Chaudhry stated that he had gone out on business. The police found no signs of foul play at the scene and did not open a criminal case, leaving the final determination to the forensic experts. An autopsy was conducted on the same day, yet the pathologist found no signs of violence, and the conclusion was that her death was due to natural causes. She was buried within a few hours of her death. Sami's sudden demise was not considered suspicious and raised no questions, except from her grieving husband. When Kazim was informed of his wife's sudden death from a heart attack, he couldn't believe it. Moreover, the press called the young woman's death a voluntary departure from life due to depression over her inability to have children. However, this version was contested by Shahed's relatives, who claimed she lost consciousness on the stairs and broke her neck while falling. Investigation and the grim truth. Syed Muhtar flew to Pandori on the first available flight and went straight to the police station to report that his wife was deprived of her life by her relatives and former husband. He described the forced marriage and her escape, as well as threats from her family. This information fundamentally changed the case. The authorities recognized it as an honor crime, but the body had already been buried, and the official report stated that Shahed died of natural causes. However, as the deceased was a British citizen, Kazim sought to involve European law enforcement and the media in the investigation. Initially, Sami's father agreed to an interview and tried to portray Syed Muhtar as an imposter and extortionist. However, after the young man produced their marriage certificate, as well as a hard-won copy of the medical report and post-mortem photos of the deceased, an investigation was initiated. The report noted bruises on the deceased's neck and legs and traces of male seminal fluid on her body, indicating that she had intimate relations shortly before her demise. But with whom, if Shakil was supposedly not at home that day? Kazim held a press conference, presenting all the evidence he had, including text, voice, and video messages from Sami, in which she repeatedly expressed fear for her life. Suspicions arose that the police had been bribed. and the deceased's father and former husband were immediately detained. It turned out they had no intention of letting the young woman return to Dubai. They forcibly brought her to the house given as a wedding gift, where they searched all her belongings for the passport and ticket, which, as mentioned, she had left with a friend. A furious Shaquille, with his father-in-law's tacit approval, physically subdued the young woman, and after she tried to escape, the men caught up with her on the stairs. While the former husband strangled Sami with her scarf, the father held her legs, leaving her no chance of survival. This account was confessed at the station by the perpetrator himself, although Chaudhry Muhammad denied any involvement in the act against his own daughter. Legal proceedings and the fate of the participants. Besides the father and former husband, the deceased's uncle, who had acquired a forged report before the autopsy, and the commissioner who conducted the initial investigation, were also detained. In court, Shaquille recanted his confession, claiming it was made under duress. He spent just over 2 years behind bars but was released on bail in September 2018. In 2019, the man remarried and again attempted to relocate to the United Kingdom, which was unsuccessful. The father of the deceased was in prison from July to December 2016 and was also released on bail. He passed away in January 2018 at the age of 52 due to exacerbated health problems, never admitting guilt or involvement in his daughter's demise. The deceased's uncle and the commissioner were also released in the fall of 2016 without facing any consequences. Soon after, arrest warrants were issued in Pakistan for Mita and Matiyaz Shahed, but the mother and sister of the deceased promptly returned to Bradford. Mita later gave a substantial interview in which she attempted to discredit Sami and her second husband, blaming them for the downfall of the once happy Shahed family. The dark mystery of the disappearance is solved 14 years later. Investigating certain crimes can take years or even decades due to a lack of evidence or witnesses. Sometimes investigations are intentionally misled to create confusion or send investigators down the wrong path. Many such cases eventually end up on the shelves of archives as unresolved. However, crimes involving life-ending actions and abuses of various degrees of severity generally have no statute of limitations, and investigations can be reopened at any time when new information surfaces. Cases related to the disappearance of individuals, particularly minors, are often solved on hot tracks. It is believed that the first 3 days are critical when there is a high likelihood of finding the person alive. Thereafter, the chances of a favorable outcome rapidly diminish. The case of the missing German schoolgirl from Berlin, Gina Krueger, was investigated for over 10 years and was considered one of the most mysterious in the history of German criminology. The girl disappeared during the day on her way home from school, having traveled just a few dozen meters from her home. No evidence, leads, or witnesses were found, and although the investigation was periodically reopened, there was little hope of solving the crime. However, thanks to meticulous work by undercover agents, the criminal was eventually exposed. What is known about Gina Krueger and her family? Gina, or simply Gina Krueger, was born on April 11, 1992, in Munich, and was the middle child of 3 in a simple family. She grew up with her older brother Tommy, who was 8 years her senior, and her younger sister Michelle, who was 2.5 years her junior. When Gina turned 11, her parents decided to separate, and her older brother, who was then 19, chose to live with their father. After the divorce, the girls were primarily raised by their mother Vesma and their grandmother on their mother's side. Both girls did well in school, were involved in music and dance, and were creative by nature. The family lived modestly, and while their father maintained contact with his ex-wife and daughters, he was more focused on supporting his elder son, whom he funded through school and supported in various ways. In June 2006, Vesna moved with her mother and daughters to Berlin, where she had been offered a well-paying job. The family settled in the Moabit district at house number 8 on Stendhal Street. On September 1st, the sisters attended one of the best local schools, which, although located in a different district, was accessible by bus. Vesna was very pleased with her new job and had big plans for the future. But soon the peaceful and measured life of the family was shattered. She dreamed of becoming an actress. From childhood, Gina loved to sing and dance, engaging in these activities seriously and with full dedication. Inspired by Indian films, she dreamed of an acting career and enthusiastically participated in school theater, as well as attending acting and stage speech courses. Teachers working with young Krueger noted that she definitely possessed the necessary talents, and thus predicted her future success and fame. Moreover, the girl had a bright, expressive appearance, a slender feminine figure, and was quite tall for her age. She took meticulous care of herself, keeping up with fashion trends, striving to dress stylishly, and used decorative cosmetics skillfully and intelligently. It's worth noting that Georgina applied makeup as well as professional makeup artists, often doing makeup for her friends and neighbors back in Munich. In Berlin, during the summer holidays, she actively attended various castings, trying to break into the big screen or television. She managed to appear in crowd scenes a few times, but these were very inconspicuous episodes. However, on Friday, September 22nd, 2006, luck finally smiled at her. She auditioned for a guest role in the television series, Turkish for Beginners, and her candidacy was approved. Gina was supposed to receive a call back on Monday, September 25th, to finalize her inclusion in the cast, discuss details, and invite her to sign a contract. The new beauty in town. In her new school, the young beauty caused a real stir from the first day, capturing the attention of all the boys in her class. However, she struggled to get along with the girls as they openly envied her and saw her as a competitor. Her classmates were slow to accept her into their group and communicated with her reluctantly, although Gina was sociable, friendly, and open, avoided conflicts, and tried to interact with all the kids in the class. The teenage girl was indeed very beautiful, danced well, sang, and even received an offer from a modeling agency to try herself as a photo model. She agreed, but unfortunately, she never made it to the planned photo session in early October. Gina dreamed that one day she would make it to Hollywood or Bollywood, where she would act in movies. She imagined herself on the red carpets of prestigious film festivals, among celebrities, dreaming of fame, recognition, film awards, and was ready to work hard on herself to achieve her desires. The schoolgirl almost made it happen, when suddenly she disappeared without a trace, a few miles from home. So the schoolgirl was awaiting confirmation of her role in the TV series, and she had no doubts about it. All weekend, Georgina could think of nothing else but the upcoming call from the studio, which was set to decide her fate. She was excited and inspired, already imagining herself on set and working on her lines. On Monday, September 25th, as usual, she headed to school in the morning. She was supposed to return home by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and since the call was expected in the late afternoon, Gina asked her grandmother to answer all calls, promising not to linger anywhere. The day dragged on endlessly for Krueger. Her classmates noticed that she seemed tense, constantly checking the time, and unable to focus on her lessons. Since she hadn't told anyone about her participation in the casting, her anxious state was interpreted differently by everyone. When school ended, Georgina, having gathered her belongings, hurried to the nearest bus stop, got on bus number 27, which she rode daily, and headed home. After traveling 3 stops, she got off at Rue Rettenover, which was a short distance from her house. However, she never made it home, vanishing somewhere halfway from the stop to her apartment. Georgina Krueger was never seen again, neither alive nor deceased. Search for the missing schoolgirl. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the grandmother, who was waiting for the granddaughters to return from school, had prepared lunch and set the table. Georgina was supposed to return first, and Michelle a bit later, since she had additional classes at the music school that day. But the older granddaughter did not show up, which was very strange because she was eagerly awaiting the call and had no plans to stay out. When Michelle arrived home at 3 o'clock, the grandmother grew anxious and started calling Gina to find out where she had vanished, but the schoolgirl's phone was turned off. Subsequent attempts to reach her also failed. The anxiety grew, and when Vesna returned from work and learned that her daughter was missing and her mobile was unreachable, she realized something serious had happened. The first thing the mother did was call the school, where she was informed that Krueger had attended all her classes and had left by bus as usual. Then the woman contacted several of her daughter's friends, hoping that the girls had simply got caught up talking or had stopped at the cafe on their way home, but they said that Georgina was in a hurry and had headed straight home. The concerned women then went to the police station and reported the disappearance of the 14-year-old girl. However, the law enforcement initially took a skeptical view, suspecting that the schoolgirl might have gone on a date, visited someone among friends, or had an argument with a classmate and was sulking alone somewhere in a park. After exhausting all possible scenarios and verifying that the teenager was nowhere to be found in any of the anticipated locations, detectives began checking reports of accidents and calling hospitals, assuming that the girl might have encountered trouble, suffered an injury, or been harmed on her way home from school. But Gina had not been admitted to any hospital either. As the night approached, extensive searches and witness interviews began. It turned out that the girl was last seen at the bus stop when she exited the bus and turned onto the street leading to her home. The schoolgirl was dressed in blue jeans with wear marks, a light blue t-shirt, a denim jacket, and gray sneakers. She carried a pink sports bag with a long, wide strap, which contained her notebooks, textbooks, and her mobile phone. Investigators were able to track the girl's movements through her device's signal. She indeed spent the entire day at school, then boarded the bus and got off at her stop. But approximately halfway to her home, the signal suddenly disappeared and never reappeared. The search began on Stendhal Street, where the Krueger family lived. A search team with dogs trained to detect the scent of living or deceased humans was dispatched there. At that point, there was still hope of finding the teenage girl alive and unharmed. Vanished into thin air. Law enforcement checked every home, interviewed all residents and potential witnesses, inspected attics and basements, spoke with workers at local stores and cafes, but no one had seen Georgina, and even dogs could not pick up her trail. By the next morning, flyers with the schoolgirl's photos and requests for any information about her had been posted all over the city. Dozens of calls came into the police station reporting sightings of a similar-looking girl in different parts of the city, but unfortunately, all leads turned out to be false. Concurrently, investigators began to follow up on all previously convicted local residents, as well as those who had been released on bail. Special attention was given to criminals and those who had shown an unhealthy interest in minors. However, all these efforts yielded no results. The schoolgirl seemed to have vanished into thin air, not making it home. No traces or personal belongings were found, as if she had never existed at all. False lead. After several months of fruitless searching, the investigation was suspended as there were no leads, not a single clue, and no idea which direction to pursue. However, about a year after Georgina's disappearance, an anonymous call came into the police station, with the unknown caller claiming that the girl's body rested at the bottom of a nearby lake. Authorities were unable to identify the caller, but they clung to this piece of information and decided to investigate it. For several weeks, highly skilled divers combed the lake bed using advanced equipment. It can be said with certainty that they examined virtually every inch, but found no trace of Krueger. The lead turned out to be false, but it nevertheless rekindled public interest in the case. The media actively discussed and wrote about the missing girl again, so it was decided to conduct another search operation. The police re-interviewed neighbors and brought in search dogs, although it was clear that this would likely yield no results. The dogs had been unable to pick up the girl's scent on the day of her disappearance, so there was little hope for success after a whole year. Investigators were confident that the schoolgirl was no longer alive, but the Krueger family members refused to believe this. Vesna concocted a legend for herself, according to which her daughter had run away to India and was now starring in Bollywood films, dancing and singing as she had always dreamed. The woman consoled herself with these thoughts and continued to live for the sake of her younger daughter. The monster next door. Search efforts periodically resumed, and in 2016, nearly a decade after a girl's disappearance, a resident of Stendhal Street contacted the police to complain about a neighbor who was actively inviting underage girls over to his place. This neighbor turned out to be a 35-year-old immigrant from Turkey named Ali K. He was legally married, raising 3 children, and tried to appear as an exemplary family man to those around him, but in reality, he was not. Upon closer inspection of Ali, and after studying his personality, the police were horrified, as 4 years prior, he had already been under investigation. At that time, he deceitfully lured a local schoolgirl, promising to sell her a trendy smartphone at a symbolic price. He took the girl to his storeroom, located in the basement of the apartment building, struck her on the head, and coerced her into intimate closeness. Afterward, he made the teenager swear she wouldn't tell anyone about what happened, then gave her a paper napkin to wipe her tears, and helped her tidy up before leaving. The girl promised to remain silent just to escape from the clutches of the monster, but as soon as she was free, she immediately told her parents about the incident, and together they went to the police to report the violent actions. The schoolgirl detailed the man's storeroom in the basement, noting that it looked more like a maniac's den. Ali was arrested the same day, but he vehemently denied his guilt and shared his own version of the events. According to him, he was indeed selling the gadget, and the girl herself expressed a desire to buy it. As the smartphone was in his basement storeroom, they went down together, and when the guest examined the device, she said that she had always dreamed of such a gadget, but since she didn't have the money, she was ready to pay in another way. Following this, according to Ali, the girl began kissing him and started undressing, and he, trying to reason with her, pushed her away forcefully, causing her to fall and hit her head. This explained the injury and bruises on her body, but the fact of intimate closeness could not be proven as the man had used a contraceptive, which he later disposed of. Ali's wife, Melek, fully supported her husband and also began accusing the girl of indecent behavior and attempts to seduce her husband. Ultimately, the man only received a suspended sentence for causing moderate bodily harm. Nonetheless, now as the police took up the investigation of the disappearance of Krueger again, they decided to check him thoroughly once more. Ali K. did not have a permanent job and got by on odd jobs, mainly living on benefits. He loved gambling and often incurred debts, was a regular visitor to the Turkish coffee shop on the ground floor of his building, where he made acquaintances with different people who treated him to food and drinks. The man carefully maintained his appearance, desperately trying to look younger than his years. He wore fashionable clothes, sometimes even spending children's benefits on them. But the main oddity about this man was his attraction to girls. He continually tried to meet teenagers, ask them inappropriate questions, and also offered strange and illegal things, for instance, help with buying alcohol or cigarettes. Ali most resembled the role of Georgina's abductor, but the police had nothing against him in this case. New investigation. Nevertheless, the Krueger case was reopened, and a new investigation was initiated due to the emergence of a new suspect. Ali K. was brought to the station and questioned, but he naturally denied any involvement in the decade-old case. His storage room in the basement was inspected, but no traces of the missing schoolgirl were found. Detectives noted that this space indeed seemed more like a meeting place than a storage area. It turned out that 10 years ago, he had been questioned along with other neighbors, and his basement had been inspected. But specifically, Ali's storage room had not been checked because, firstly, there was no reason to, and secondly, according to residents, the door always had a lock, so only the owner could access it. Ali himself had been an active participant in the search operation at that time and was one of its most engaged members. Despite the fact that the police had nothing concrete to charge K with, they decided to keep him under surveillance to learn as much as possible about him. Unofficial monitoring was organized, and all his phone calls were intercepted. Soon, this provided initial results, and detectives discovered that the man had significant debts unknown to his wife. He had lost about 10,000 euros in poker and had no idea how to get out of this predicament. The investigation decided to focus on this aspect. Undercover agents. The decision was made to introduce an undercover agent into the suspect's close circle, who was expected to gain his trust, extract the necessary information, and secure an on-record confession. However, everything had to be done slowly and carefully so the suspect wouldn't become suspicious and would feel secure. For this purpose, a special agent codenamed Hakan was prepared and sent in, posing as a successful businessman who had recently moved to the Moabit area to open a car service station. A couple of times he visited the cafe in Ali's building, where he loudly discussed business plans and details with a partner. As they left, the partner mentioned that they needed to find a manager soon, noting that it was a well-paying position and it was important to choose wisely. After these words, the second man left, and Hakan stayed to finish his coffee, when suddenly Ali approached and sat at his table. He took the bait and immediately offered himself for the manager position. A conversation ensued, which quickly turned into a casual chat, and the businessman noted that Ali might fit the role, then mentioned the salary. Ali's eyes lit up at the figure. He began dreaming of paying off his debts and buying the sports car he had always wanted. The men exchanged phone numbers, and from that day on, they began to communicate regularly, and their relationship quickly grew into a friendship. Hakan even started taking Ali on business trips to other cities, aiming to get closer to him and gain his trust. But this friendship had the opposite effect, as the suspect strived to appear as the best version of himself to his prospective employer. He boasted of his achievements, even the most minor ones, and preferred to keep silent about any wrongful acts. Several months later, realizing that the case was not progressing, the investigation decided to introduce another agent, this time a woman, who would play Hakam's girlfriend. This introduced Susan into the story, whose goal was to befriend Ali's wife, Malek, and try to uncover any secrets the husband might be keeping. It only took a few meetings for them to get along, after which all four started socializing as families. Malek was a sociable woman, but regarded her husband as nearly a saint. For years she had turned a blind eye to his infidelities, did not believe the schoolgirl who accused him of violence, and was convinced that her husband was a very good person, just unlucky with jobs. But now everything would change. Soon, Susan realized that Ali's wife wasn't just covering for him. She truly believed that he was simply incapable of harming anyone. The agents even decided to use a trick by spreading a rumor that there was progress in the Krueger case and an unnamed source had indicated where to find her body. Hakan left a newspaper with this article in his car, which Ali had started borrowing occasionally. Several cameras and recording devices were also installed in this car. When the suspect and his wife got into the car, she soon noticed the newspaper left behind, quickly skimmed the article, showed a bit of surprise that the case was still being investigated, and then indifferently put the paper aside. It became clear that Malek knew nothing about this. Otherwise, she would have inadvertently revealed herself. Good cop, bad cop. 6 months later, the investigation finally concluded that their plan had failed. The K family had become friends with the agents, even trusting them to look after their children, but no confessions were forthcoming. Ali strived to appear honest and upright, and his wife was simply unaware of the crime her husband had committed. Moreover, maintaining their cover was becoming increasingly expensive. They even had to lease a space for the supposed auto repair shop and signed a sham employment contract with the man to avoid raising his suspicions. The investigation then took a desperate last step by introducing another agent who would play a villainous role. According to the backstory, his name was Cory. He was Hakan's cousin, had a criminal record, and was running some underground business. It was hoped that Ali, meeting a kindred spirit, would open up and confess his sins. The men quickly bonded over their shared interests. Cory treated his new friend to drinks, and together they visited various clubs and houses of ill repute. The new friend confessed that he made money through not entirely legal means, and thus wanted to spend it indulgently, with Ali willingly helping him in this. Simultaneously, Cory constantly complained about his girlfriend, with whom he supposedly could not break up because she was blackmailing him and threatening to report his illegal business to the police. According to him, she constantly demanded money, and her appetites were growing. One day, while having drinks with his friend, Cory declared that he intended to rid himself of the bothersome blackmailing girlfriend in a radical way and was willing to pay a sum of 100,000 euros to anyone who would do the dirty work. Ali perked up at this and offered to take on the task himself. His friend agreed, but suggested they discuss the details in a secluded place when sober. Monstrous confession. In November 2017, sitting in the agent's car, the men discussed the plan to eliminate his nuisance girlfriend. At one point, Cory doubted whether Ali was capable of taking a life. In response, Ali revealed something he claimed no one else knew. He confessed that more than 11 years ago, he had taken a life of someone with his bare hands. Ali said that in 2006, a stunning young girl had moved onto his street, who completely captivated him. She passed by his house twice a day on her way to and from school, so he had memorized her schedule and would step out to greet her and pay compliments. Despite her young age, He described her as hot, and he burned with desire for her. One warm September day, when the girl was returning from school and the street was unusually quiet and deserted, Ali saw his chance. He asked a neighbor girl to help him move some items from his storage area, and she kindly agreed, not sensing any danger. Once they were in the basement, he locked the door and tried to kiss the schoolgirl, who struggled and screamed. He then knocked her unconscious with a blow to the head and took advantage of her. After the incident, afraid she might report him to the police, he decided not to let her go. He grabbed her throat with his hands and squeezed as hard as he could. Ali described the process in detail, explaining how he felt the crunch and sensed the pulse in her neck fade away. The girl's body lay in the basement for several days, so if the search team had looked into his storage area, they would have immediately uncovered the perpetrator. But no one suspected anything, and once the commotion had died down, he wrapped the body in an old rug and disposed of it in a garbage bin, which went directly to the landfill. Ali's confessions were recorded on a camera installed in Cor's car, and by the evening of that same day, he was taken into custody. Unfortunately, the girl's remains were never found, as the waste of a landfill was regularly incinerated, and her body was essentially cremated. The trial and verdict. The hearings in this case lasted another 2.5 years before a final verdict was delivered to the criminal. He adamantly denied any wrongdoing, claiming that he had fabricated the entire story to gain Cora's trust. But in reality, he planned to rescue his girlfriend by turning in his friend to the police as soon as he received the money. No other evidence was found besides the criminal's own confession. However, his detailed and vivid account was enough to convince the jury of this man's guilt. In March 2020, nearly 14 years after Georgina's disappearance, Ali K was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of ever being released. His wife, Melek, never believed in her husband's guilt, convinced that he had implicated himself while pursuing a noble cause